Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you again so much for joining us today. This is our fourth in the Real World Learning series of events. I'm Lucy Evans. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Frog, and you'll have seen from the agenda that was on the screen earlier, we've joined from many schools today that will be sharing their stories, their ideas, and their anecdotes. And today's overarching theme is overcoming lost classroom time and addressing the gaps in attainment. So just a quick bit of housekeeping. We will be taking a break during the morning, sorry. We will be taking a very short break. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a chat facility. We won't be using the polls or anything like that today, but please do keep chatting, and as the guest speakers join today, feel free to put questions in there, and as and when I can, I'll be posing those questions to our speakers. So just to let you know who's going to be here today, we're going to be joined shortly by Dr. Mick Walker, who is the Vice Chair of the CIEA, but also we have Joe Hawker from Davidson High School for Girls in West Sussex. I can see Andrew McDonald-Bowyer is also here in the audience. Vicky Pritt-Roberts is joining us from Ellesmere College. Andrea Robson, the Head of Primary at St George's in Madrid. Good morning all. Sophie Bailey will be joining us to run the panel session, which is straight after our break today. George Bly from Greenshaw High School. Tizzy Sylvester will be joining us from Frederick Gough School. And Mark Anderson, our very own ICT evangelist, will be joining us for the session, which is Observations of Real World Learning, which is a new session, and it's about recognising all of those schools that have been sharing their best practice through the last year. And it's really about recognising those schools that have been helping to form this community, this global community of schools wanting to share amongst themselves. So as you know, you don't need to have Frog to be part of this. Frog are just the facilitators of a global community of schools just sharing, really. So I've got a bit of an introduction for our first speaker, so bear with me. Mick Walker will be joining us now, and Mick has taught for over 20 years and has passion through attainment and assessment. He has most recently been involved as an advisor for the Department for Education. As I said earlier, he's the Vice Chair of the CIEA, and he's also the Chair of the Institute of Directors, Examinations Committee and Evidence-Based Education Advisory Committee. What a mouthful. But that aside, I have great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Mick Walker to our stage this morning. So, Mick, good morning. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Good morning to you.
I'm very good, but we can't hear you. You might be on mute.
Ah. No, the microphone's on.
No, we've got no, well, I've got no sound at all. Can anybody else hear? Everybody can hear fine. It's just me. Well, that's wonderful, isn't it? So, Mick, what I'd like you to do is there's a couple of key themes that I'd like you to cover today. And the two themes really are around addressing lost classroom time and plugging those gaps in attainment, and also twinned with that, the balance of well-being and assessments as schools have started to go back and are all at different stages of having their children back into school. How do we really address that balance? So there's 2 points that I wondered if you could cover for us whilst I get my sound sorted out. So would you mind kicking off, and I'll get somebody to pop in and sort my sound out?
I don't mind kicking off at all. I like to start the day by kicking off. It's just I've just realised I can probably say anything I like. Well, Lucy can't hear me, but I guess the other colleagues can. Okay. Yeah, one of my big concerns, I think, at the moment is this whole language, if you like, around catch up and lost learning. I'm highly conscious that schools haven't been closed. Education certainly hasn't stopped. Children have been either learning online. We've had children in school, children from key workers in certainly in the UK. We've had children in for certain periods of schooling, and then they've been at home in their various bubbles. So one of the issues we've got really is we've got this very mixed, if I can call it an economy, a very mixed stratification of young people who've been in, they've been out, they've been distance learning. And then, of course, we've got some young folk who've been disadvantaged more than others in this predicament. The ones who haven't had the facility to engage with teaching, with teachers, either through technological issues or lack of good technology, and various other things that are in there. So one of the things that does concern me is this notion of all in one kind of one size fits all, because they're not. Children have had incredibly different experiences. I've spent quite a lot of time over recent weeks actually talking to children, to pupils, to students, because I think their voice in all of this is essential. We should be listening to that and not just assuming things. The kids are very bright, kids are very perceptive, and listening to what they have to say about this experience, I think, is no bad starting point. And from this, I've spoken to children who, although they live on the same road, the same street, and attend sometimes the same school, sometimes different schools, it's very clear that they've had, again, different experiences, even within the same school, because they've been in different bubbles or different year groups. The language of catch up and lost learning, why it troubles me, is that we're in danger, if you like, of labelling children, putting them in a category of somehow they're behind, they're in, there's an issue, there's a problem. Now clearly there's a challenge, I'm not disputing that for one moment, but to label them in that way I think is not very beneficial. I was thinking back just recently, it's only about a few years in fact since we dropped the notion of levels of attainment, an element of the national curriculum in England, and one of the notions behind dropping that label was simply because it labelled children. It put a number on them in this respect, in a hierarchy, and for some children it spurs them. It's a motivation to move up through the levels. For others, it becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and sometimes they're seen that way by teachers and schools. Unfortunately, they're categorised. So I would try to escape wherever I can to move away from this so-called notion of catch-up, lost learning. Learning hasn't stopped. You can't stop learning. I think we should differentiate between schooling and education. Education happens all the time in the school and out of the school, whereas schooling is a formalisation, if you like, a way that society deals with young people in terms of getting over particular areas of learning, particular knowledge and skills. So that's the kind of the first thing that I'd want to say. The second is, and it addresses, I hope, Lewis's point about well-being. This is probably the big thing, the big issue, if you like. I mean, talking to the children who I mentioned earlier, the students, one of the things that they clearly have missed is that social interaction, the seeing friends, the playing with friends, the sports, the drama, the music. It's not just about the English and mathematics, and they have missed that. And some are extremely excited to get back into school. I've been reading on Twitter, which is something I delve into now and again. Don't understand it, but I delve into it, and I read on there some kind of really warming things about young people who are already trying on the uniforms, just seeing if they still fit. I know that some schools have actually dropped the idea of using uniform because a lot of the kids have actually grown and since they've been in school last, and they haven't been able to go out shopping and buying new blazers or whatever else it is that they need. But the curriculum for me, and this is, I think, something that schools really need to think about. What is your curriculum? What do you define as your curriculum? For me, it's everything that happens in the school. It's not just English, maths, geography, history. That's the timetable subjects, but the curriculum is everything that goes on in the school. So within that, we've got this whole notion of the socialisation, if you like, the ethos of the school, the way we treat one another, the way that we support one another, the way we approach one another, and all the many myriad of things that go on in the school. So there's all of that stuff, if you like, that we need to be conscious of and not maybe over focus on certain aspects within reading, within writing. They are important, I accept that, but we need to think in a much broader sense and think about welcoming students back. I spoke to a head last week who was basically saying they're going to do nothing special. They're not going to make a fuss. It's one of their part of their ethos, not to fuss, I think, is in their one of their principles. They want to get back to this so-called notion of normality, so-called as soon as they can, and they want to build on the enthusiasm of the kids. Some of them are dying to get back. They're just there's going to be a well, if you like, of enthusiasm, not necessarily for algebra, but certainly to get back into the school and see the pals, and maybe that's something that we can build on. So I think thinking about the entire experience of school, how we shape that, how we form that, how we welcome children back into, I think what I describe as a period of it's recovery. It's not just looking up for lost learning. Can you hear me now, Lucy? Are you back?
I can hear you. Yes. Right. Yes, I'm all back. Yes.
All right. Well, do butt in at any time to stop my ramblings.
Well, to be honest, you were talking about the kids coming back in and that kind of balance of well-being, and I think that's absolutely key. But one of the questions that is popping up, I'm seeing a lot, and you mentioned about Twitter, is about testing. And can you actually test? Can you test too much? I think because we've got these gaps. We're addressing that lost classroom time. We're trying to bring everybody up to speed. But it's not just this year, is it, Mick? It's going to be next year as well. And there's a bit of a mountain to climb. I mean, yes, this year is about those lost assessments and that lost classroom time. But actually, once you start, as you say, palling up together, next year is going to be equally a big mountain to climb, especially for next year's cohort.
I think that's an important point. I mean, this is not just over between now and the summer break. You're absolutely right. This is going to go on for some time, 2 or 3 years. We're going to face all kinds of issues, particularly around qualifications, assessment, examinations around there. We know that, again, I'm conscious that your audience is wider than England and the UK, but within England, some of the high stakes examinations that take place this summer, they're going to be assessed by teachers, drawing on a variety of things. I mean, they're encouraged to use standardized tests, but they're also encouraged to look at the work that the kids have produced over the period, coursework, or however you want to describe it. And I think one of the things that is, my position, I think, on this, that assessment is absolutely pivotal to teaching and learning. I don't separate it out. I don't see it as a kind of a big deal, if you like. That's something that's done to people. It's a tool. It's something that we use for a variety of reasons. We use it for qualifications. We use it to get jobs, to differentiate between people. But teachers use it minute by minute in the classroom. Every second of the day, there's some assessment going on. I'm conscious I'm being assessed now. People are looking and listening and thinking, what the hell is he talking about? If it was in a classroom situation, I'd be looking at people's faces and I'd be trying to work out, are they listening? Have they nodded off to sleep? And then I'd be testing through questioning and trying to get into understand whether children are grasping some of the key concepts. So assessment is an important tool that we should use all the time. We can over-test, but I think we need to be clear whenever we test, whenever we assess, why are we doing it? What are we trying to find out? And I don't think it's a great idea necessarily to get the kids back in on next Monday or whatever it is, and then by 10 o'clock we're just bombarding them with a load of tests and quizzes and what have you. I think we need to be a little bit more subtle than that. But certainly I'd be wanting to assess, but it would be not just assessment of, as I've mentioned, algebra or reading or whatever. It would be something about the well-being, about trying to gauge where they are mentally, if you like, as to how engaged they are, how excited they are or not to be back. And I think one of the things that struck me recently talking to the kids, as I mentioned, was a group of kids who, for going back to school, it's not all that, it's not such a great idea. They've actually thrived being outside of the school situation. I'm talking to a parent actually of a child who was bullied at school. Now that bullying hasn't happened. They've gone outside of that. I know children who prefer to work without being interrupted, if you like, certainly at times, and being at home. They can do that without all the things that are going on in the classroom. So yes, I would be using assessment. I'd be using it quite a lot, but I'd be thinking very carefully about why am I using it? What is it I'm trying to find out? And I think for me, one of the things I'd be wanting to know, we do need to know where the gaps are. We sort of said some of the kids have been engaging right through. My grandson's thrived. I don't think he's missed an awful lot in terms of content. I think he's certainly missed his pals. And he's 7, by the way, so he's a little one. He's certainly missed his pals. But I think in terms of assessment, we've got to think carefully about what it is. And my advice for what it's worth is, I've already heard teachers talking about, this is the catch-up. They're wanting to go back and cover all the things that they would want to cover, all the things they would normally teach in a year, a term, or whatever. And I kind of understand that, but I think we have to stand back a little bit and just ask ourselves, what are the key elements? What do kids really need to know? And I think really need to know to move on to the next stage, the next year. So, and I don't want to insult any teachers of geography or history or whatever, but do they really need to spend a lot of time looking at maps of Europe and colouring in the various countries and things? Is that something they really need to do? So my thing, and it does come back to some of the work that Frog have done actually over the years with life after levels. Thinking about the key concepts, the big ideas. What are the things that at the end of a year, a term, that you really want the kids to grasp? We call them key performance indicators. I don't care what you call them, to be honest, but the key ideas, the big ideas, the key concepts, and think about those and try to work towards those. And there are relatively few of those. I mean, the curriculum is jam-packed of stuff that's absolutely wonderful. I'm not decrying all this breadth and wonderful things that happen in the school, but we are in a situation where we need to kind of focus on the key aspects, the key ideas, and try and get that done. And the way I'd do that is to work with other teachers. One of the advantages that people have in the Frog family, however you describe it, is you've got contact with other people. And I think, I'm an inveterate thief of ideas. If I see an idea that's worth grabbing or a methodology, I'm going to take it. Hopefully I'm going to credit the person who worked out or did the thinking on it. I'm not I do have some principles, but I think sharing some of those ideas is good, but looking with other teachers. So for example, if I was a year 7 teacher or teaching 11-year-olds, I'd be wanting to work out what I thought those key concepts are, so that when I pass that child or those children over to the next teacher, to the next year, I'm giving them the intellectual capacity, the tools that they need to move on. But I would want to check that with a year 8 teacher, because it's all very well me having my ideas about what are key, because we all have bias, we all have things that we enjoy teaching. I was guilty of that. There are some things that we love doing just because it's fun, but you have to ask yourself, is it of most benefit to the kids? So I'm thinking about continuity is something that's really worth looking at. Am I preparing the children as best I can in the time I have now to get them ready for the next teacher, and not worry about all the nice to haves? I mean, we know they're nice to have, we know they're beneficial, we know they're fun, but don't get too, don't sweat the small stuff or whatever it is. Don't worry about things that haven't been covered that would normally be covered necessarily, because they may or may not be essential for that child to move on.
But also that would be, so that's you're talking about addressing those core skills, Mick, and twinning up, so almost balancing the workload with your peers, so that you're identifying not just what's a core skill now, but obviously we've talked about the mountain of next year. What do they need to know this year to enable them to transition up a year? But on top of that, on top of the academic core skills, and I know we're going to hear about this a little bit later from another school, but some of those life skills that are really important when you're putting the academia into the workplace, you know, what are those things? How do you balance that kind of thing rather than saying, right, you've got to learn this, this, this? How do you then interpret that into life?
Yeah, but again, I think we've got to trust teachers on this. I mean, you know, we're kind of overlooking, or, you know, there's a danger that when I read in the papers that kind of people overlook the skills, the knowledge, the, you know, the profession. This is what teachers do. You know, I mean, this is what teachers are about. I mean, you know, they know the subject, they know the kids, and this is why there's kind of no one size fits all to this. You know, when I said right at the start, there are different groups. I've just noticed someone on the chat has put, you know, children, special educational needs. I mean, absolutely. You know, there's so many different clientele, if you like, so many different needs within any one class. The teacher I spoke to in Lancashire last week, he's identified 11 different groupings, I think, in any particular class. You know, these are the ones who've been in all the time, children of key workers, ones who've been in out, etc. But I think, you know, the teachers know that. The teachers know they know their children. They know how to handle individuals. I think, unfortunately, some maybe in secondary education, in higher education, they might not know the children as well as, say, primary teachers in the, you know, the younger phase, where you've been around those same children for longer period. But I think your point about, you know, the skills that sit around this, some children have developed some incredible study skills, if you like, in terms of the way they organise. And I was intrigued at I think it was your last event, Real World Learning, when I was listening to Nick House, particularly, and Kate Ragg. It was fascinating listening to them about the way that distance learning, what they'd learned from that. You know, they'd learned things from that. And this is what teachers do all the time. You try things, you see what's working, what's not working, you modify it. And what struck me about Nick in particular was talking about the well-being, you know, the talking to children, the socialising, making sure that they, you know, how they're feeling about their work. And Kate was talking about how you present work, you know, the pedagogical side, if you like, that what they'd learnt at Whalley Range, where Kate teaches. It's not just a matter of throwing things on screen, you know, giving people stuff to do on a computer or whatever it is and letting them get on with it, that people see things in different ways without the teacher there to mediate. And it might mean that we do things very differently in future. And I'm already involved with a couple of research projects at the University of Leeds on this, about, you know, what can we learn going forward, because we have learned some things. You know, you listen to Kate and Nick and many others who were on who were sharing their experiences. We've learned a lot of things about how children learn, about how they engage with learning, and we've certainly, you know, sharpened our armour in terms of how we use technology. I mean, that, you know, that's obviously been a key, but we've also to be conscious of those kids who haven't had those advantages. You know, there's many tales of children who haven't had access to support. They haven't all had parents who are giving them the support that you'd like to see. They haven't all had the technology. And we shouldn't read too much into, you know, what preconceptions on this. I know that, you know, there are families who you put them down as being everything from them. They're kind of well-to-do, they've got all the facilities, but the children have been working at home in that environment where the parents are also trying to work. You know, they're still trying to hold down a job. So it doesn't mean to say those children have had the support, the backing that they might have. And equally, you know, disadvantaged families. I know disadvantaged families who have bent over backwards to support their kids. You know, they've put such an amount of effort in. But I think we have to be conscious of all those things. But the teachers in the classroom will know that best. They will know the profile of their kids, and we need to support the teachers in giving them what they want, not what we think they want, and not making them go for tutors or whatever it might be, or summer schools or night shifts or whatever else it is that people dream up. Let the teachers decide on this, and then let's try to support them to give them the tools that they need to achieve their goals.
I think that's really important, and a nod out to a lot of the comments that are coming here on the chat. It says, you know, every single school is different. So we will have some schools here where the parental expectations are going to be through the roof, because they are paying for smaller class sizes, a more directed approach. We've got kids here that we've got SEND kids. We've got kids that have been doing brilliant things during the lockdown periods that they've had, and we need to celebrate that. but it's that recognition, I think, that every single school is different,
Yeah.
and everybody has their own teaching style, and just not forgetting that this idea of catch-up is a one-size-fits-all.
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing that kind of unifies them is that they all attend the same school. That's kind of it. And I just think, God love them, that you watch kids walk through the door on a morning and enter this world. And when they enter that world, hopefully we treat them as, they're all equal. They all deserve the same. They all, should have the same aspirations, but we know that they are different. We know that they come in, before they come through that door, they've got very different backgrounds. And God, I remember, many years ago when I was teaching, some of the kids who couldn't do homework at home, for example, because there was family issues, family problems that prevented them from doing work. They had the Mickey taken out of them for doing homework. So I used to, they used to come into my class after school and sit there for half an hour and an hour to do homework. Not from my subject, but from any subject. They could just come and sit in an environment where they could have a little bit of a chat, do the homework before they went home. There are others who have got everything you could imagine. But again, teachers mediate on this, and this is why we have schooling. If you look, this is why I often differentiate and keep differentiating between schooling and education. Schooling is a particular construct. It's a particular way of organising the way where we do things. But every school is different. Yes, I totally agree. In fact, every classroom is different. You get 25, 30 kids, 15 kids, whatever it is in front of you. They're all individuals. They're all little gems. They've all got their own, aspirations. They've all got the same issues, the same different issues, different problems. So we never should treat them all the same. And I don't think teachers do. I think teachers understand that. And I noticed, if I may just say something about examinations, because that's
I was going to pose that one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with myself that I can reach something at one side of the screen and still talk without falling over, multitask. I think the examination thing is important. One of the things that strikes me is it's almost like leading time to before something, if you like, significant happens with kids. So if you're 7 or 8 year old, you've got a number of years before you start doing things like end of key stage tests, or if you're in year 7, you've got 5 years before you do GCSEs or whatever in England. If you're doing your GCSEs this year, then time is obviously more pressured, or even next year, because we know kids have missed things. So again, there's a real issue around that, just how much time children have remaining in the system. But one of the things I would point to, that when teachers start doing their assessment for examinations, they need some really careful thought around this. We saw tremendous grade inflation last year when teachers did the assessment, and I don't think anyone does it necessarily deviously, although you talk to schools and they always distrust the school down the road. You go to that school down the road and they just distrust the school that you've just left, which is sad. I mean, it's a real shame. We shouldn't have that level of distrust. But I think if you look at the CIEA, if I may just make a slight plug on for that, they're running a thing now for lead assessors, which is to help schools to understand things like bias, about how to set standards within a school. And again, the life after levels, there's stuff on there about exemplification materials that they can access that through it's Frog and the NHT put that together. So I think there are some tricky months ahead in terms of exams, but I would just appeal to people to stay accurate, to try and maintain the standard. There's a tendency, I think, for teachers to assess the child rather than the work. You tend to think we know he or she could do better, therefore I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Exams don't work in that way. And information doesn't do anybody any good in the end. I know a lot of it's driven by accountability, but we're not doing the kids any favours by giving them grades that don't really or truly represent their attainment, because in the end it kind of catches up with them, and it just pushes up. It just devalues, if you like, the qualification. So I think people need to think very, very carefully. But again, technology is wonderful on this. You can share examples of work. You can talk to other teachers in other schools. God, you can do it in other countries and ask them, is this what we'd expect of a child of this particular age or this level of attainment?
So, Mick, we're kind of at the end of our time, which I'm guessing why your video's just your bandwidth has gone wonky, but we can still hear you. I think would you mind just putting into a couple of sentences, just a summary of, I think, that the takeaways that you could give to the audience. Just sort of the kind of the not panicky stuff.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Lucy, but I think I got that. I think that the key thing is to remember this is not a one size fits all. That, you know, to think about the children as being individual, that they're coming from very different experience of COVID, of background. I think the other thing is to stay calm through all of this, not to put pressure on anybody, be it teachers, be it the kids. I think carefully about the key elements that you want to make sure the kids have grasped before moving on to the next stage. The key ideas, the key performance indicators, as I mentioned, so that we don't get into this morass, this mess of trying to catch up on everything you can't. And I don't even understand what catch up is. I mean, I'm 70 and I still haven't caught up with learning. I'm still learning things, learning day by day. So I wouldn't, you know, let's not get too anxious about that. And I think finally on the exam end, if you are facing students coming back now for this term, and you've got exams, people going in for qualifications, then again, you know, be honest, use the processes that the CIEA would support you in, that the exam boards will no doubt be providing you with, and let's try and be as accurate and as fair as we can. And last, in terms of assessment, which, you know, it's one of the things I talk about a lot, just that's a tool for teaching and learning. It's central to teaching and learning. Don't think we've got to be assessing kids right, left and centre. Let's try and engage people in learning again. Let's get that joy of learning back in there.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And obviously for me, that has come into the office with the best internet and the best sound and the best quality. I'm the one that's absolutely gone wonky. So thanks for bearing with us. Mick, I know there's been loads of questions in the channel, and if anybody does want to pose any more questions to Mick, then if you want to forward them to myself at hello@frogeducation, I will gather the questions and I will ask Mick if he could kindly spend some time sending you some answers. But thank you so much, Mick. That was an absolutely brilliant start to the real world learning today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So next up this morning, we have Joe Hawker joining us, and Joe is a subject leader for geography at Davidson High School for Girls in West Sussex. Now, we've heard from Davidson previously in our real world learning journey, but today, because of the focus being around addressing those gaps in attainment, Joe will be joining us to really talk about, as Mick was saying, about those KPIs and the Kpi Boost. And how that actually transfers into their school. So I'm hoping that Joe will be able to join us. Have we got Joe there? I'm getting a message to say she's having trouble joining us, which she did in the beginning because she was blocked by school techies. So I'm hoping that Joe can join us. Joe's having a problem. So Joe, okay, in that case, if Vicky is ready, then I would like to see if Vicky from Ellesmere, I know this is a bit of a random jumping up the queue, but if Vicky can hear me and if Vicky is there, then perhaps she can join us around teaching and assessing across different time zones that she can. Thank you. Vicky, thank you for joining us early. And I know that you have had your own challenges with overseas students, and I'm very grateful to you for joining us today to share your story. So what I'm going to do is take myself off screen and let you take control and share your screen and talk to the audience. But thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Hi. It's great to be here. You know, I'm going to put a little PowerPoint up. It's more of an aid memoir for me, really, just as I remind myself of who I am and what the school's about, which I thought might be quite interesting for you guys. So I'm going to try and share my PowerPoint, which hopefully I can do in a minute. There we go. We should be seeing something in a moment. Okay, yeah, I think it's there. Being a little bit thing, because we use Teams for teaching, and the Teams puts a nice red box to reassure me that you guys are seeing things, or normally the pupils are seeing things. But I think what I'm seeing here, it's happening. So who are we? Well, we are a independent school, day school and boarding. So we've got the whole caboodle. We're a non-selective school. So I know, I've worked a long time in the state sector. I've worked a long time in the independent sector. And I know when I was working in the state sector before I moved into independent, I have certain views about independent sector. And they were kind of blown out the water when I worked at Ellesmere, because when I came to Ellesmere, it was, and I've been here a long time now, too long to name. But when I came, I realised it's a very, it's a Woodard school, has a Woodard Foundation school. It's very embracing. It is non-selective, genuinely non-selective, and we have quite a high proportion of students that have specifically dyslexia needs. We've got quite a specialist unit, and always had for a long time a good reputation for helping children with dyslexia. But we're an international school as well. So although we're in sleepy Shropshire, and when I look out of the windows, I see the cows and the fields, and it's lovely. We really are out in the sticks, but we are an international school. We do have a large proportion of international students, particularly the older ones. So obviously, understandably, families don't want to board their children when they're very young, but as they get older, they want them to come to an English school. They want them to improve their English language, and they're aspiring for them to go to an English university in the main. So we've got quite an international community as well. And as I said, they come from all over the world. In fact, we have from 20 different countries. So quite a mix, and particularly more in your middle school. We cover the whole age range from age 7. We have a small Key Stage 2 unit, and we go right the way through up to sixth form. And it is the older students, more year 9 upwards, that are predominantly the internationals, and very much sixth form. So that's a little bit about who we are, so you can kind of put it into context. And what we do is offer the national curriculum. We adhere to the national curriculum. We work through all of that up to end of GCSEs, but we also do offer IGCSEs as well. So that's depending on different departments and different subjects, what they feel is the best fit for our students. So some subjects are IGCSEs. And then in the sixth form, as I've said, we offer a whole raft of A-levels. We do the International Baccalaureate, and we offer one BTEC, which is the BTEC Sport. So we've got quite a breadth of things going on. And as I said, that's just to get into context so you know who we are. So what did we do come March last year? Well, obviously, like you guys, we were just getting on with life as best we can. And then the world began to implode in March. And what we had to do is, first and foremost, as soon as we were told that they had to stay at home, that was a big issue for the boarders, because stay at home actually is here. So clearly we started that kind of situation with the trying to move the staff onto online, rapid upskilling going on. So it was a lively time, but in particular there was this added addition of how do we cater for the boarders who were scrabbling around trying to organise, or their parents were trying to organise flights, and our house staff trying to support them, who are teachers, people who run the houses. Our house masters and mistresses are teachers. They have a reduced timetable, but they are teachers. We don't have a house parent sort of setup, and so they were very involved in helping to support these children in getting home. And there was a big gap then, because clearly keeping the learning going was quite difficult with all this going on, but we did the best we could whilst we were upskilling the staff at the same time. We sort of, over the coming weeks, towards Easter, we started having more and more children actually at home and getting them onto flights and abroad. And then we began to realise that whilst it was great to get everything online, we had a big issue of the time difference for some of our students. And again, as you know, we see in our own sessions, there would be sometimes issues with regard to internet connections and facilities, and some of our students didn't initially go home. They went to guardians or family members in the UK whilst they was trying to sort out going home. So we did have people kind of all over the place with all various different levels of equipment and so on. So what did we do? Well, there was a lot of confusion. I have to hold my hand up. For a week or two, a lot of confusion while we're realising what the problems were, starting to talk to staff, talk to children, come up with various plans. It's amazing what you can do at a fast pace with a whole load of people in a very short space of time when everyone's, pulling the same direction, because everybody wanted to try and settle things down, get the children safe to wherever they be, either staying here and making sure they were okay here and not sort of rattling around in a boarding house on their own. So we had to reorganise all that. And also okay to travel home. And our day pupils were not feeling abandoned, and we were actually starting to connect with them. So it took a bit of time. But what we wanted to do, and what I put a slide up there, is just to talk about what our focus was to try and get things settled down quickly, to start to get ourselves online so we could start to set work. Obviously, we got our VLE and we were sending emails to students and so on. And we have a policy which most schools have, where our students our pupils all have an Ellesmere email. So at least we were able to do some initial contact with that. But we also wanted to try and get things to run in some shape of normality. So the structure of the way we do things, such as our half-termly assessments, our feedback to parents, so the students knew we have a topic-based approach where they're working for 4 to 5 weeks, and then all subjects have an assessment, which is then informs what we call the period grades, which is for a period of time, the parents. So we have that kind of structure. And we wanted to keep that going because it works. The children feel comfortable with it. They understand what they're working towards. But we had to find a way of making that happen, taking into account the time differences and all the other things. Anyway, so that was the busy work over the Easter, and then we came back at the summer term. By then, we had completely closed down on the boarding side. All the boarding children had gone home, with the exception of one, and I'll come back to him a little bit. I'll leave that as a cliffhanger. What happened to that one? So I will tell you in a moment. And obviously, the majority of the staff working from home, we got them set up online and so on. We did have to have, obviously, staff on site who were working with the key worker children, but they were all day pupils at that point. So that was where we got up to, and that was how we faced summer term. Now, I know we've been told by Lucy and Graham, and I understand this is not a frog sales pitch, so I like that. I like the fact that this is just us sharing how we've gone through this process. So I'm not doing a frog sales pitch, but I've got to put my hand up. Having frog as the VLE was brilliant because we upskilled. We've all been there. We've all got half the staff singing and dancing and using the VLE, great, and we had the other half who were a bit lagging behind. Well, they certainly upskilled very quickly, and we did have staff on site, on the team who were able to help them. So there's a great lot of collaboration going on. And we particularly found the frog quiz was really useful for us, not to solve some of these problems that we had in being able to have lots of different kind of assessments running at your appropriate time. So we do the teaching, we have a few weeks of topic based, and then we'd be setting our assessment week. We'd run our assessment week, and for those overseas, we could set timed assignments which they could do in taking into account the time difference, and that was good because obviously you might sort of say, well, how do we know it was them? Well, we timed them. It was quite difficult for them to be able to, and they'd only be one attempt questions, so they wouldn't be able to go back and try it again and all that kind of thing. So that quite worked, and the children actually seemed to quite like it. It gave them a focus. They knew what they were working towards, and then they could see how they did. So that was really good, and we, like I say, upskilled tremendously on that front, and have made a great use of that. Other kind of assessments we've done is, like we're doing now, screen share. My children did presentations, so on, and for those who had the different differences in time, we found they could usually join the morning lessons, the early half of the morning lessons, because it would kind of be evening over there. So they would join those, but they couldn't do the later in the day ones because we were getting to the night for them then. So for those, they could do they'd be go on the VLE and download the task, and they would then do a recorded presentation, and likewise we'd be recording things that they could see later on. So they sort of were able to get involved in that, and project tasks and so on. They could obviously send us and screen share with us. So it did mean that we were having online face-to-face contact with all the students that were overseas, but just they couldn't manage every lesson, and we had to work around that. But again, you know, with the variety of tools that we had on offer, it you know, it had its ups and downs. It wasn't plain sailing, but it did work. So this is the kind of stuff that we had with them, you know, which was great. You know, they were able to screen share. We did a lot of, you know, creative work. So I think this is mice and men work that we're doing. So we'd set them the task, and then, you know, there would be a final assessment of that task. Perhaps while they talk through it, they would present it to us, or they might record something for us to see. And as I say, I know a lot of people are worried about the validity of, oh, how do you know it's their work? Well, the fact that they have to talk through it, and, you know, we all know, don't we? We know when it's their work and when it's not. And you've only got to ask a few probing questions at an appropriate point. In all fairness, there were very rare occasions when we thought, oh, hang on a minute, that's not yours. And we could sort that out. To be honest, it was amazing how the children engaged in this. They did seem to have much greater ownership, and they worked with us. They could see we weren't the fount of all knowledge anymore. We would, you know, have ourselves muted occasionally and do all of that sort of thing. And there was a camaraderie with the children, that they would help us as much as we would help in them. So it's been a real, you know, I've been in the game a long time now, and this has been a real interesting experience. So that was another one. There was a collaborative exercise going on. It was an assessment piece. They'd been set the task to do. Different people had to do different things, and then they collaborated. And that's the pupils collaborating on a whiteboard. And again, for the time zone people, then we would record it, put it up on the team site, and they would then access it later on, and they could still contribute to it. So they'd be able to see it, and they, you know, be able to see their friends in action, and then they could then add a slide on, or send a comment on to cover their bit. It took us a while. There was a lot of experimenting, but by the time we got sort of well into sort of April, May, we were kind of really settled into this way of working, and most staff were pretty comfortable with it. So I noticed Mick said a little bit earlier on about what we've learned. Gosh, we've learned a lot. That's, I think, the answer. We've been on this journey alongside with the pupils. And what I think we've learned is that we teachers can adapt at a pace that we just didn't realise we had in us. It's as simple as that. It's been amazing. The staff have been fantastic. Been a real, you know, slog. And obviously some staff didn't see for months and months and months, other than on a screen. But, you know, we had meetings like this after school, you know, to help each other and show each other what to do, and so on. I think our more reluctant tech users have realised you don't have to be tech savvy to actually teach with tech, you know, with a kind of supporting and helping each other. People have really upskilled amazingly, and you know, able to, some of them are quite proud that they can share back now as well. And like I say, it was okay to make mistakes, and I think that's really been a fantastic experience for the students, that they see us making mistakes, and that's a good thing, because we can just laugh it off and say it's about attitude, isn't it? Those are the life skills we're teaching. That's just as important as, you know, was mentioned, you know, where everything places are on a map. It's just important that, okay, you get a couple of them wrong, well, don't beat yourself up about it. You know, what, you make a mistake, you learn from it. And they saw us making the occasional bloopers, and it was good. It was good. And I think they really, I mean, the feedback we have of parents, vast majority, obviously some had internet problems, and we did have some one or two rucks and kind of engagers, which we took action in and worked with. But the vast majority were really kind of quite, in a strange way, enjoyed the journey. They felt more part of the learning process, rather than we were doing it with them rather than to them. And that was a big game changer for us. And we've also learned that we can connect with the pupils when they're not at school, which is pretty obvious, isn't it? I don't know why we didn't think of this before. You know, if we've got students who have to return home overseas. Perhaps they've been ill, but now recovering, but they're not well enough to come back, but they're ready to engage. We were just emailing them stuff, boring old worksheets. Well, now they can actually connect in a lesson. The teacher can put them on a tablet or something now, and we did a little bit of that in sort of October, November when we were back in school. But we did have some people isolating, and they actually were sort of on a tablet on the desk, and they could be turned and shown to the rest of the class. And we are going to be doing that now from next week. We've got quite a number of students who are still overseas and won't be coming back next week. They probably will come back for summer term, but for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be teaching what we call hybrid teaching, where we've got a fair whack of the class in front of us in the room, but we've got a number online like this who's sort of dipping in and joining in the lesson, again, where the time difference allows. But we're going to carry on doing that because, as I say, when we will have students sometimes who have to be at home and they're recovering and what have you in the future, and have to travel home, and we can use this. So what we have found, I think, basically, is that it's been a journey, and it's not one I would have wished on anybody, but we have found that obstacles can actually become stepping stones, and I think that that's been a good outcome. There's been a lot that we have learned, and I think we're a better provider now for our international students, despite the time zones, and I think we're a better provider for all of our pupils. So I hope you found that interesting, and if nothing else, I found it very therapeutic. So thanks for that.
Vicky, that's just brilliant. I think it's so lovely that you are just you've addressed all of those problems that you've had. You've embraced them. You've called them the bloopers. You're moving on, and are actually incorporating things that you've learned into a better way of being a better school and a better provider for your learners. It's just lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. It's been good to be part of this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Next up we have Andrea Robson she's the head of primary at St George's in Madrid. Now, Andrea has really turned things around and really stepped up the game in the last few months. So, Andrea, thank you for joining us, and thank you for stepping in and slightly changed agenda today. And shall I just hand straight over to you, because I know how in control you are.
So thank you very much, Lucy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be here, and thank you to Lucy and Claire for inviting me this morning to share our journey at St George. As Lucy said, my name's Andrea Robson. I'm here in Madrid as head of primary, and this morning I'd just like to share with you the journey and the successes and our next steps for our supporting children with their learning. I would like to just really build on what Vicky and Mick were saying, and certainly my wholehearted agreement about that catch up, and how people were talking about it on the chat, ditching that concept of catch up, because then you're forever playing that game and you're circling on that wheel of rat racing. And we have taken a slightly different approach this year at school. So I'm going to share my screen with you and just explain to you the things that we are doing with both our curriculum and in terms of assessment, and of course engaging the most important people, which is the children. So my internet is just thinking about that, and then we're going to move on. One of the things that we believe in, and I'm sure it's true for all of you as well, is the importance of the children in their learning and having children's engagement in their learning. We believe that all children can meet and exceed their potential. But one of the things we wanted to make sure of was that, building on the developments of our curriculum last year, was that we had identified pillars of learning, core pillars of learning, those fundamental important things that we believe children should learn. I know Mick was talking about prioritising those things that are really, truly important. So what we did was we spoke with all of our team, and we identified 5 pillars of learning. I'm just going to talk to you about what they are very quickly in maths. but we have established them for English as well. And we've talked about the importance of the numbers, the number system to place value. We've talked about their children's physical ability to count to 100, the properties of numbers, odd and even numbers, and of course one of my personal favourites, the times tables. Whether you love them or hate them, they're one of those key pillars of learning. The key thing about curriculum is that it is progressive, and it goes from A to B to C, D, E, and what we all know is that if children haven't mastered, if they're not really secure in those concepts that constitute A and B, by the time you get to C, D, E, F, they've completely lost it. And the gap between where they should be and where they are just continues to get wider and wider. And we wanted to get away from that sheep dip approach, because by the time you get to even to the end of the first term, you have very, very stressed teachers, you have quite, demoralised children, and the gaps are just getting bigger, and teachers feel powerless to help and support those children, and the children lose confidence in their ability to be confident learners. And Mick, you were talking about children being labelled. Children in year 2 saying, I can't do this, I'm no good at that, is absolutely heartbreaking and should never happen. So we identified these 5 core pillars of learning, and we made sure that every year group at an appropriate level was baselining these core concepts to make sure that children could count forwards and backwards to 100, to make sure that they had one-to-one correspondence, to make sure that they had those core skills. And we made those links between development matters, so the early years curriculum, and at year 6 level, we were then using and being advised by the year 7 teachers in terms of what was important for that transition from year 6 to year 7. And that move away from just core knowledge to those skills as well, to make sure that what they were going up into year 7 with was relevant and appropriate. We had quite a long conversation about long division. What is important? What do they need to be able to do? What do they need to be able to apply for when they go into year 7 next year? And we've had conversations about the relevant and the appropriateness, and we have descaled. We've scaled back quite a lot of the curriculum. My year 1 teacher said to me, I'm not really particularly interested if they can jump a 3/4 turn, Andrea. I want to know if they can count. And we've had those conversations throughout the term. So what we did was, using these core pillars, we restructured and broke down the curriculum, and we created a curriculum line. So we established in the first term, I did this for the teachers, and we wrote down basically by week 1, we're going to aim for this, by week 2, this. So we had a continuum, a curriculum line. This term, and what I did was I created a maths team. So there was a maths representative from each year group that I meet with weekly, and they were saying to me, right, we're ahead on this, bump this up, take this out, move this up. So they were having conversations where they were saying, this is not, we can't do this, we can do this, we're on track, we're falling behind. And this term, they created that kind of map. So they were in control of what was being taught when, and we were ditching things that weren't important. We then, if I can show you, we then were assessing children weekly, and I'll talk to you about that. We restructured our assessment systems. As Mick was saying, teachers know minute to minute where those children are. And they are the experts, and it is absolutely about trusting those teachers. So we set up on the progression charts, and I would like to say at this point, again, there was some talk on the chat about it, but Claire Maybe from Frog has been absolutely outstanding in supporting me scaffold those progression charts and giving me endless support, often in her annual leave as well. She's just been amazing. So a huge shout out to Frog for all their support over the last 18 months. So this here is a year 3 class. No, my apologies, they're my year 4s. So the blue line is the curriculum line, and it goes up to the end of term 2. The red line is the average cohort. So this is the entire year 4, the progress that they have made. And what you can see here is that our year 4s, right up to half term, were absolutely bang on. This is half term. Then they were making progress all the way up until the end of the Christmas term. There was some talk on the chat about snow days. The irony that our school was closed in Madrid due to the weather, not due to coronavirus. And then when we came back, you can see that the children were then continuing to make progress. What we did was we linked these to school levels. So the out of age band in blue here, working towards, and the at level. And you can see that consistently the year 4 cohort, and I would just like to say Vicky was talking about the makeup of her school. At St George Madrid, we are 40% international, 60% Spanish speaking, and we are non-selective. So we have children from all abilities, including children with additional learning needs. So this information here includes the progress that all children are making in this cohort. So we then took that one step further, and we were able to track children's progress not only against the curriculum standards and against school levels, but also against, as you see this dark band here. So this is Daniel. They're all in the frog family there. This is Daniel, and you can see that the red line is Daniel, and he has made excellent progress all throughout this year. So this is a success story. We can now measure Daniel's progress against the curriculum line, and you can see that there are periods where he's absolutely bang on, a little bit below, but there are times here where he has been exceeding where he is meant to be. And this has given us a huge amount of control, and the teachers having that control of the children's learning and being able to measure their progress. Now, in terms of data collection, what we had done this year was we had revised our school levels, and with the teachers' input, we have created consistent standards across the school so that they had far more control and far more consistency about what they were assessing and what each level meant. So together, we created a structural system of what colours meant what, linking to school levels so that we could report effectively to parents, but the teachers were in control. So we used these assessment standards on the Frog platform to then create a responsive assessment. I'll just show you now from the teacher's point, this is what a view, this is what they can see. So if I show you the year 4 cohort, the teachers were tracking weekly. Here you can see the broken down objectives from the curriculum when we were measuring those consistently across the whole school. However, as we all know, having all this data, having all this information, assessing weekly doesn't actually help us unless we're going to do something with it. So it's not what you've got, it's very much what you're going to do with it. So we use this to enable, when we saw children were not making the progress that we wanted them to make, that we were able to then respond effectively to their needs. We have a look at what this looks like for Daniel that we were looking at just now. And taking those pillars, you can see here that from Daniel's tracking, and he is an example of a success story, he has got all of those key concepts, all of those pillars of learning firmly embedded. And this has enabled Daniel to make effective progress right the way across the curriculum. Of course, these are the things that he is learning on. And using this approach, we've had great success with children like Daniel. And I'll talk to you in a minute about the children that we were very concerned about and who were not making the progress, because it comes both sides. It's great to have those success stories, but it's also about how you're helping those children who are falling behind. From the children's point of view, in order to engage them in this process, we implemented last year something called the Big 50. Now, it's a year 4 curriculum standard that children can learn their multiplication and division tables. And I in no way take credit for the Big 50, because it was something that was in my school and I had to pass when I was little, which was a very long time ago. But we implemented the Big 50, and what the children had to do was sit a big quiz on the times tables, and they were asked a question twice, and they were given a time limit. And the response from the children and the staff with this last year was absolutely fantastic, and children were gunning to pass their times tables. And as we know, it is one of those things that's absolutely imperative. If you haven't got your times tables, you can't master fractions or manipulate fractions or decimals or percentages or measures or even tell the time. And we had huge success with it. So we expanded that this year into core concepts involving number. So we had number certificates involving a Big 50 from even nursery, where they were getting certificates for counting to 10 all the way up to year 6, that were only focused on those key elements, those pillars of learning. And let me just show you how that has worked in terms of the success that we've had with that. Excuse me. In terms of year 4, if we take this shows very clearly where the children have succeeded. So these children with the 2 purple dashes, they have passed their Big 50 in number work and in the times tables. And they're going to sit one further one, which will be for fractions, decimals. And we feel this will give them that core grounding that they need to succeed. It was successful across the school, especially in this year group, where the teacher has taken passionate control of what we're going to be assessing, what we're going to have on the curriculum, and taking those things out. One thing we have taken out of the curriculum is analog time. If you look at the watches that children wear now, it's mainly a digital clock face. They're not particularly interested. And if you're looking at international ways of telling the time, there are so many different ways of telling the time. So 25 past 2 or 10 to 6 doesn't make a lot of sense in an international context. So we have actually removed that, and we're only focusing on digital time. So for these children, it was a huge success, and they were very, very motivated to sit their certificates and go through that process. However, as we all know, it's not just those children that are succeeding that are a worry. In the database, this looks like a rather alarming list, but let me just explain to you what this is. This is the number of units on the curriculum where the children are either falling behind or have not been assessed for 2 weeks. So it was a very, very high standard. Now, as Vicky was saying and Mick was saying, you've got to trust your teachers. Any teacher, and around the world, you walk in, they will be able to pinpoint those children who are falling behind, who are struggling, and they will know exactly where those are. So this number is the number of sort of units where those children are falling behind. And our challenge at the moment is to reduce this list down. The list down at the bottom, we're not particularly worried about, 1 or 2. It was these children that we were particularly worried about. And so what we did was, in January, we started an intervention system. We are very, very lucky at the school because we have a very high level of support. So this little girl, Bea, the red line is Bea's progress, okay? The green line is the year 4 average cohort. That's their progress. And this is Bea's CAT target. You can see here that at the beginning of the year, when we were going through and identifying those pillars of learning and putting in scaffolded support, Bea, even here, was starting to struggle. At half term, she went up, but again, her progress was flatlining. So in January, what we did was we took the assistants, because I didn't want to add anything more to the teachers' workload. The teachers, we also operate a hybrid learning system. So we've got children in class, socially distanced, wearing masks, very few manipulatives. It's very, very difficult, to be a teacher at the moment. And I think what teachers in my school and around the world are doing is absolutely incredible. What we did was we trained the assistants, and we put in a very, very targeted support system. So we base support on going back to the pillars of learning, those key elements that children needed to learn. And the children were assigned a coach, and they were taught how to play this game. It's based on something that I'm developing. And you can see here that the games are based rigorously on those core pillars of learning. And these games that the children were playing were very heavily scaffolded to help the children with those core concepts. So you can see here that Monica played this game 7 times and then had great success. She then, with the numbers, the next stage up, played it 3 times. And you can see that by scaffolding at the very lower end, she was then able to have big successes. I will show you another child. You'll hear something funny at the moment. This is the selected voice. So children can play this. There you are. This is a game that children can play in any language, and they can choose the computer voice as well. This is a little boy in year 2. Jeff at Christmas was struggling to count forwards and backwards to 10. And the concept of odd and even numbers were proving very difficult. He was become very, very demoralised with his own learning, and his teacher was absolutely frantic about how to help him. So we gave Jeff a coach, and he went from within 4 weeks from learning numbers to 10, learning numbers to 100, odd, even, counting in 2s, 5s and 10s, and now he's making great progress on his multiplication tables. This concept of support is based on the assistants taking that control and meeting with those children. Bea has been on the app, and you can see here, we put her on a few weeks ago, and her progress has absolutely shot up. When we've got children from year 2 to year 6 that are taking part in this intervention system run by the assistants who are facilitating that role as a coach, and they're checking in with those children 3 times a week. And so far it has been incredibly successful. One of the things we have found, and this is something Vicky and Mick were talking about, that emotional well-being of the children. We have a child in year 4 called Adriana. Last year, it was very difficult. We couldn't get hold of mum. It was the one child you want to speak to their parents. It was very difficult to get hold of. Adriana wasn't doing her homework. She's now got a coach working with them 3 times a week, running with this at home as well. And this child is bouncing. She's doing her homework every single day. She's telling me what she needs to work on. She's telling me what her next steps are. She's celebrating her successes. So it has been a very, very small success. And for me, what has been even more successful is now we're getting teachers saying, we're ready to take on something more, Andrea. I'm happy to take this on, and I'm going to work with a small group of children and coach them on that. So if we've started taking they're under so much pressure. We started with assistants one-to-one across the school. We're now rolling that out into small groups where the teacher will coach those children, and then we're going to start rolling that out even further so that we're training the teachers, and then we're going to use that to assess our online children. We're going to train the teachers how to create those games on the app so that they can have even greater control. Because for me, it's about giving the teachers the control over the curriculum, working at their speed, so we're not overloading them, but enabling those children to do what they can under very, very difficult circumstances. So the idea is that by the time we start school next year, children in the school will have all those key concepts firmly embedded, and we can roll out and carry on further. So I hope I haven't talked too much. And I'll hand back to Lucy now, but that's something that we've done, and we look forward to rolling it out and supporting more and more children and stopping that gap getting bigger and bigger. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you so much. Again, the chat There was lots of questions in the chat that I'm sure you'll see. I mean, the one thing that just to note here is the speed in which that you've put all of that rich information together to identify those gaps, to then plug those gaps. And I know you've thanked Claire, but the school has put a tremendous amount of work in. And thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Lucy, is it possible for me to answer one question?
Yes, of course.
She's just asking about children who fail the Big 50 and becoming demoralised. I think that's absolutely key. The children don't sit those that quiz until they are fundamentally ready, and we're using those assessments and those protocols, and those children sit them when they are ready. And if they don't pass, what we do is we work out where they're making those mistakes. We work with them, we fix those mistakes, and then they sit it again. And I'm starting to work with a group of Year 6s who are sitting their ultimate number master using that coaching approach. And the certificates are not for all across the curriculum, they're just for those key elements. So it is a success system. Sorry, I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
No, thank you thank you very much for answering that, Andrea. And I'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Jo, I gave you a big introduction earlier about the things that were happening down in West Sussex at the school. Thank you for bearing with us and the struggles of trying to get online. Goodness knows what happened, but you're here. So yes, I believe Graham is going to be running your PowerPoint. So you're going to be in true, I think we might have called it Chris Whitty style. You'll be saying next, Graham. So I'll disappear now and let you start. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, as Lucy said, my name's Jo. I'm the subject leader for geography at Davison High School, so we'll be talking a little bit geography focused. And I'm going to be talking about how we've kind of moved from an online curriculum to student-led learning. So if you go to the next slide, I'll just kind of outline for you, first of all, what kind of where we were and where we are now, so pre and kind of mid-lockdown, I suppose. So prior to lockdown, we definitely used Frog as a real resource. We recorded all of our key performance indicators on there, and we already had sort of like an outline of our curriculum on our department pages. But what we did find was that our students didn't really use those very much. So we put quite a lot of work into like putting everything together, and then they would only really use them if we really directed them to it. And also staff pretty much were marking on paper, not really ever using the feedback tools. And so we've been, obviously, as we all have, we've been through a period of real change and transition, and out of that have come some real positives. So now, obviously, our students are really confident at finding things. They do it all the time, pretty much every lesson. One thing that we've been surprised and encouraged by is how our students have independently started to kind of use their feedback to try to make improvements. We found the students have been mostly really positive about what they're doing in geography. And for staff as well, obviously huge amounts of staff development, but one particular area is that we were previously using marking just on paper, and now we are using only Frog mark books and feedback. So next slide for me, please. Thank you. So what's come out of that is that we particularly have been focusing on developing targeted intervention and improvement for our students in both Key Stage 3 and in Key Stage 4. And the great thing that's come out of it is that that has happened with kind of minimal effort from staff, which has been great. So I'm just going to talk to you about what we have done and what that looks like. Next slide, please. I'm presenting live. Sorry. So in Key Stage 3, what we've been doing is developing our learning locker resources. So I've been head of geography for for about 4 years, and we've always had one big issue that keeps coming up that we are needing to deal with, which is how can we intervene with our students? Oh, thank you. With our Key Stage 3 students who aren't making expected progress. So for us as a team, we are teaching all of Key Stage 3. We don't have a lot of capacity to do extra intervention and to support students kind of outside of lessons. So we've always struggled with what can we do to help our students when we know they're not making the progress that they should be? How can we help them to make expected progress? And now we feel we have a strategy, which is really exciting. So if you show my next slide, then this is just a little example. So what we've done is we've developed these tools which come from the masses of information that we've been able to access through having students upload their work onto Frog. So they have obviously been submitting all their work online, and we've been marking it all online, and we realized pretty early on this is an amazing tool that we can use. We've got this resource of great exemplar, or sometimes reasonably good exemplar material, and we have then used that to kind of create some really targeted feedback. So previously we used to do this like period in our school calendar called Kpi Boost, where the students would work on KPIs that they hadn't got yet, and they would try to improve on them, and then we would kind of give them the chance to have another go. The problem with that was that what we would do is just put loads of stuff in the learning lockers, loads of material for them to access, and they would often just feel a bit confused, maybe not sure where to start, maybe not sure what the most useful resource was. So now we've made these sort of sheets. This is just one example. We're trying to show them actually what a good piece of work looks like, what it is that we're looking for, showing them some positive feedback, but then also giving them an activity to build on from that. So for this one, which is about physical processes in geography, something we find the students really struggle with is the sequencing. So they understand like, oh, volcanoes or earthquakes are formed in a particular way and it involves these different elements, but they're not always so good at the sequencing. So we've kind of put this together as a really targeted way of helping them to improve. Next slide, please. And what's great about this and that we're really excited about is that it's very targeted. So we can help our students, if they've already achieved the KPI, then we've also got some that say, help me to exceed it. It fits obviously with our school strategy of Kpi Boost. But what's really lovely is it's really low teacher effort. So all that we've had to do is find an example, which we've got masses of. And what we tend to do is we have like an open folder that we share as a team. And just whenever we come across like quite a good example that's legible and useful, we just stick it in the folder. And then later we can come back and do a little bit of editing. But it really doesn't take a lot of work to put something together. Yeah, we found this kind of great resource that we've been able to then use and move our students forward with their Kpi Boost season that they have. And similar, we've also been working with Key Stage 4, next slide, please, to develop something similar. So this is slightly different because slightly more personalised. At Key Stage 3, it's very much like we're dealing with hundreds of students and we're wanting something that is going to be targeted to the KPI. Obviously at Key Stage 4, it's a little more personalised, but what we've still found is this wealth of resource that we have in the work that our students have uploaded, that we're much more able to exemplify what we mean when we give feedback. I don't know, I'm sure we've all had times when we've given feedback like, explain this point more fully, and the students are like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you want from me. So now we can exemplify really clearly. Students can see common mistakes also and learn from them. And we can also show our students how common themes apply to all questions. And again, I'll just show you one example if you go to the next slide. So this is one student, the same student, their work is about a month apart. And it's just an example of how accessing that feedback and us using little snippets of exemplification has allowed the student to move on. So even if you don't know anything about geography, you can kind of see how we are developing their structure, developing their use of language, so that they're writing a much more understandable and full answer than they were beforehand. So yeah, we found it really exciting that actually a resource that we already had available to us has been so useful. Next slide for me. So the outcomes of this so far, and we're really at the beginning of a journey here with this particular project. You know, in our school we do Kpi Boost, and we love Frog and we love using bits of it, but we're certainly on a journey. But what we've already found is that our students are accessing feedback more independently. So they're going in, accessing things without us asking to. They often arrive to lessons ready to make improvements. Sometimes you even get them contacting you saying, am I allowed to redo this? Or please, can you give me something that I can do to move me forward in this KPI? Which is great. And another outcome that maybe we weren't expecting is, I think I said at the beginning that previously we had like our curriculum all mapped online and the students didn't really use it that much. But now what we're finding is they're seeing feedback and they're going and finding more resources in order to add to and build on and extend their learning, which has been really exciting for us. So yeah, it's been kind of a real positive of coming through this whole experience that we weren't really expecting, is the change that using online feedback has made for us, and also just using this resource that we have freely available to us to help our students move forward. Thank you. That felt a little bit rushed, so I hope that was okay.
Jo, not at all. And I know that you're going to be joining us. We're going to take 5 minutes just to get everybody ready and make sure we've got everybody ready for Sophie Bailey, who is going to be running the panel discussion. I know she'll probably be wanting to quiz you a little bit more about that. But I think the journey that you've taken, obviously KPIs, Kpi Boost, your curriculum, etc., was in place before you went into lockdown. I think the massive changes that you've seen is how you've been obviously addressing that communication, because obviously nothing takes away the teacher, but having that connection with the teacher whilst they're not in the classroom and seeing that rich feedback and still managing to keep those children engaged in their learning is a real testament to you and the school. So thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so we'll minimize you on the screen for a moment, Jo, because we don't want to lose you. And we're going to put a screen up, and we're just going to take 5 minutes to get a quick drink and get everybody ready for the panel. And then Sophie Bailey from the EdTech podcast will be hosting this panel, looking around some of those key themes that we've talked about, you know, assessment beyond the classroom, and are the kids okay, and how are they feeling, and trying to look at areas of raising attainment. So bear with us, and we'll see you back here at 10:30 UK, so just under 5 minutes time. Okay, thank you. See you shortly. So Sophie, lovely to see you again, and thank you for doing running the panel discussion for us again this morning. I'm going to hand straight over to you. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucy. Well, it's a real pleasure to be back here today. I always feel that Frog completely hit the nail on the head with the topics they choose and the time. So I know it's a really critical conversation about assessment, but also well-being today. I think we've got about 25 minutes, so we'll try and stick to time. And just to kind of tee up the panel discussion, because I know we've heard from Jo and Andrea, 2 fantastic presentations today. I guess the sort of situation that we're in is trying to balance the needs of where learners are at, whilst managing an extremely fragile school community. So I'm sure you've all experienced this. So you know, whether that's tired teachers or parents, heightened government expectations at the moment, and perhaps some slightly frazzled learners. And then on top of that, in some of the contexts, I know, Andrea, you're in Madrid, but in some countries from people who are attending today, the actual assessment landscape itself is changing. So, you know, in the UK, exams now being assessed by teachers as well. So there's this whole volatile situation. So I guess my first question, we'll jump straight into it just for the sakes of time, is, you know, in this situation, how are you attempting to balance the need to assess children, fill the attainment gaps, whilst also being realistic about what we have all gone through and learners' well-being as well? And partly some of this has been gone over already, but I know some people will have joined sort of halfway through the event. So I don't know who'd love to sort of jump in and at that top level talk about how you're balancing, on the one hand, assessment, but also the need to support learners and teachers' well-being as well. Elizabeth, perhaps I'll throw it to you because we haven't heard from you yet.
Brilliant.
Just from a teacher point of view, actually, I think for me, I've got now a decision to make in terms of, well, what do I do with those students when they come back in, those year 11s who are coming back to school? They obviously want to know their grade. What do we think that the teacher's going to predict them? But at the same time, we haven't finished the course yet. So it's that very much balancing act between those children will want to go on, some of them, to do business studies or ICT in the future. And actually, I've got to get them ready for them being able to study that at level 3 when they move on from our school. But equally then balancing that to, what grade do I give them? Do I have the evidence for that grade? Can I actually justify that grade that I want to give? And it's very much at the minute the decision between what's right for that child in terms of getting them ready for their next steps, but equally being comfortable and confident with the grade we're going to provide for those students. So big decisions really at the minute as to what we do. Certainly it's year 11 parents evening this evening, and I know there'll be the question on everybody's mind is, what grade are you going to give me, miss? What am I going to leave with? And it's a bit scary really at the minute as to what we do that's right for them, so that they're not disadvantaged in their futures and that they are able to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's a tricky situation for us at the minute, but that's just from a teacher point of view. No, I mean that's really interesting, and I loved Andrea's comments earlier about this idea that we do need to prioritise the curriculum, that we can't, it's not a case of just squeezing everything back into the time remaining, but then also you are sort of balancing the need to progress to that next step. So anyone have any further comments on how you're actually going about balancing those two things?
I think that a lot of it also comes down to trusting your teachers and reassuring them that it's okay. In terms of what we're doing with saying we're going to prioritise this element of the curriculum and we're going to ditch this, that's quite new for teachers who worry that they're continually behind and then they're not meeting expectations. And it's teachers globally do a fantastic job, but they do worry and they're anxious. And I think a lot of our roles as a leadership team is to say it is okay. We are a huge campus and we've implemented one-way systems, so there is considerable time walking around the building, and it's lost time, but it's not because it's okay. And that feeling of it is okay, we're going to do what we can do, we'll do what we do well, we're going to help support you, is absolutely fundamental. And one of the things we've brought in last year across the school was the growth mindset ethos, but using that with our teachers as well. It's okay, and that is slowly, it doesn't stop them worrying, but it reassures them to hear it.
I think that's so important to remember that these are, it's a cliche now, but they are unprecedented times, and not to just feel like we have to keep doing the same thing just because that's what's gone before. But and my sort of following question, then we'll get into the detail of how you've actually sort of gone about things as well. But everything has changed. I put here, this is a chance to question how we go about assessment and what assessment looks like. And I know, we've already seen some examples of, continuous assessment, so using games and so on. I just wondered if you had any ideas on, how you'd like to see assessment evolve out of this situation, things that you'd like to see continue should we get back to some sense of normality as well.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think, as I sort of mentioned in the presentation, a big part of that is kind of keeping it quite low stakes. And I think, what you were saying about how do we balance as we come back to school, part of that is just, let's teach children things that are enjoyable and interesting, and keep the testing kind of low stakes. I know that's hard for our GCSE students, where we're desperately trying to have evidence of what they're doing, but yeah, let's do things that are exciting and enjoyable and focus on what we are learning right now, and give ourselves space and time to think and reflect on how we're going to maybe shift what we do, or maybe embed skills a little bit differently as we move forward.
And I'm certainly aware as well of the digital world that we're in currently. So, my 7-year-old as a mum can now type. Doesn't like to write anymore, but certainly can type very well. And there's that concern, isn't there, between actually, as you've just said, doing things that children enjoy because they're in school and they want to actually take part in things that are fun,
and that they're going to get great learning from, but equally balancing that between what you've got to achieve and what you've got to do. So I liked what Andrea, what you said earlier, actually, I'm not going to do this part of time because they don't need to know that at the minute. So why do we do that? Let's do the things that they need to do, like the numbers, because that's crucial for them forever. So I think it's a balancing act then between actually making it fun and doing the stuff they've got to do. So I think that was both of what you said actually rang true as a mum as well as a teacher at the same time, thinking that is crucial.
Absolutely. Welcome, Vicky. And in fact, it made me think, I was reading something recently about apprentices and endpoint assessment, and actually, that delaying their, sort of finalising their apprenticeships as well, or sort of proving that because of, the need to show in-person skills. And whereas we have VR, we have simulation, if we could do a better job of getting some of the assessment in some of those platforms, it's not exactly the same, but I think there's the need to sort of adapt, as some of you have proved as well through what you're doing. But we'll move on to some of the details, so for people that are listening in, they can kind of benefit from all the things that you've been up to. So my next question was, what strategies and tools are you using for assessment and attainment in your current situation? So, I love the example of the coaching and the games, but are there any other sort of details for people who've joined that you'd like to share?
I think one of the things that we found very important is that ongoing continuous assessment. But whatever you're doing, whether it's, like the spooky game or Times Table Rockstars, it doesn't really, the app that you're using or the platform that you're using has got to be linked to purposeful assessment back in the real world. So making sure that if they're playing a spooky game, they're looking at the bridging between problem solving, that you're then using their coming back, their children are accounting for their progress, and then the teachers then updating their own assessment records. Otherwise, what you end up with is a lot of plates spinning and no real world connection between them. And if you're going to go down a road of trying to, implement support systems, using your support staff, getting parents involved, getting the children involved, everything has got to be linked up. Otherwise, it becomes a paperwork exercise. And you've got the more joined up you can make the activities or the learning that the children are involved in with your assessment, and then linking that to progress and next steps. That's the fundamentals, of making sure that everything you're doing is meaningful, relevant, and appropriate.
I think what we found with using the mark book in Frog, which a lot of us have been doing, but an awful lot of us haven't as well. And we're nowhere using it as sophisticated as Andrea was doing there, which was very impressive. And I'm going to be passing that on to our Key Stage 2 manager. Having said that, more of us have been using it because, as Joe was saying, we're all doing the online marking now, and that has been a revelation in getting staff to suddenly realise marking actually doesn't have to be that tone of stuff that sits on your desk and makes you feel depressed and reaching for the GNT and writing out. It doesn't have to be that. And that's been liberating for people. We've been able to mark as it's coming in, but it links to that point about you're then getting that progression. And therefore you are having continuous assessment, although we do half-termly assessment points. Now that's just like summing up, giving them maybe you missed a few pieces of work, so this is your chance, the kind of thing. But it's not just a complete standalone as it was. It's now we're looking at everything across the market and all the stuff we've been using. And what I've also noticed is the feedback quality is much better now, because again we can mark as it comes in, so it's not such a and I certainly saw that with Joe. I recognised what you showed on the screen there, with the annotations that we're doing. It took us a little, we weren't using that before, and we needed to have Graham help us quite a bit to kind of get up to speed. And then I kind of taught myself with Graham, and then I kind of showed everybody else. And once everyone started using it, everyone really thought it was a really good tool, because we were giving feedback almost within a day or two, quite instantly almost, to the students. And it was better quality feedback because the marking wasn't so onerous. I mean, you can actually record your feedback. I mean, I nearly fell off the chair. I could speak. I was saying, well, you haven't explained that very well. And it was nanoseconds. And you can actually record it, and the children can hear it, and they open up the file and they get the feedback and they hear me witching on at them. So it's just like, wow. But that made workload much easier, but it also made quality much better, ironically. So yeah, interesting times.
I thought that was really interesting, Vicky, because Joe, I know that you said earlier that, you know, you've moved from marking on paper to, you know, having everything within the platform. So, you know, do you think that you'll continue to do that, or will you go back to using paper?
Yeah, it's funny because we really didn't want to do it at the beginning of the year. We were like, this is annoying, but I suppose we have to.
Yeah.
But we found, just like Vicky said, we found it really, really helpful. Not just from the teacher point of view, but also from the student point of view, in that their feedback is all in one recorded place that they can get to again and again. So they aren't like, I don't know where that question is, miss, I've lost the paper. It's all there in one place. And we can draw on it in lots of different ways. So for us, that's definitely something that is here to stay, even when we're back to normal.
That's fantastic.
Can I just build on everything that is saying? One of the things we want to start moving towards more, and we're really dabbling and playing around, and you know, it's embedded in different ways across the school, is getting children to self-assess their work, so that children are assessing the success criteria from the lesson, which enables the teacher to identify exactly the different levels within the class, where the children are in their learning, enabling children to identify those success criteria at the start of a lesson, or before, you know, a big piece of writing, or enables then children to self-assess their own work and set their next steps. So as a utopian model, if you're then having teachers check that or assess that children are self-assessing accurately, you then have a far more robust platform to enable children to make further and more rapid progress on their own terms, because the children are identifying their level. They know where they are, they know where they've got to get to, and they know what success looks like. And having that cyclical motion of children identifying the success criteria, self-assessing, setting their next step, supported by the teacher, then flips the role of teacher from teaching to facilitating. And the children and the teacher having far more control over where the children are and the rate of their progression in their own learning.
Absolutely, and I love that example from Joe about the sort of peer-to-peer learning and using the examples. So that's fantastic. And Elizabeth, because we haven't heard much from you yet, but I know that your role is also sort of helping teachers to get familiar with digital tools. And I wondered what sort of time-saving tools or life hacks, for want of a better phrase, you know, you've helped your teachers sort of embrace to get through this difficult time as well.
Yeah, I'll talk about it a bit more later, but essentially I normally run CPD on a Tuesday, and we were looking at Rose and Shine, and suddenly when we were all at home, Rose and Shine became less important, and suddenly online teaching became the predominant session, shall we say. So Moat, which I know you just mentioned in terms of verbally recording your feedback to students, that's been invaluable. And staff just say the quality of the feedback they can provide, because you're not having to write it, is so much better than if you were writing it, because you can just get so much more information very quickly. So that's been one. Another one is auto magical forms, and they are magic. So essentially they take a PDF and change it into a Google form. Students can then answer the form and it marks it for you. Honestly, it's a revelation. So we've used that an awful lot as well. Even just things like the whiteboard system. So students were able then, who don't have potentially paper at home, but they could use their whiteboard system on a device that we provided for them and engage with the lessons that they could then show their answers to the teachers. That's been really useful as well. But it wasn't just things that I found. You know, I can stalk Twitter all day long to find things that other people are suggesting. But then our teachers found things and they'd record themselves using them. And then on a Tuesday evening, they'd show it to the staff. And that's been fantastic, because it's then not just me preaching about things I've found. It's what they've used that saved them when they've got 5 hours a day on a screen, what they can then use to make their 5 hours just easier and a little bit, you know, less stressful, because it's a very different way of teaching. So we've asked them what's working for them, and then we've shared it on a Tuesday evening so that other people can go, I'm going to steal that because that's going to save me a bit of time. And I can then go outside and get some fresh air at the same time. So it's been really that whenever people have found something, we've just shared it, because it's been a case of, if this is going to save us all a little bit of time, let's do that.
No, exactly. We found that collaborative air of getting people, rather than being top down, just like this. I mean, this has been a magical tool as well, in that, we just get people together, we've had cluster groups, and then we moved them around and just sort of said, look, just, and you've got your go-to people. Oh, go to so-and-so for that one, and go to so-and-so for that one. And we had one of our young teachers, he's only in his second year of teaching as an NQT, and he got quite busy on a number of things, and he was bowled up, and I said to him, right, run a session. He was like, but he did a fantastic job, and it was just nice for the staff, because even if they were a bit daunted by doing it, they knew they could speak to him separately afterwards to have a chat. So it's having our own mentors within ourselves, and to be able to go to, because you're too busy to do it as soon as you've come back from an inset thing. But if you've got your own staff here to talk to, it just makes so much sense. And we really found that collaborative air is, again, something that's been a real benefit of what's gone on.
And I think that as well. So when an evening comes and then that member of staff isn't so sure because they're not so comfortable with the computer, being able then to speak to somebody on a one-to-one to go, I have no idea what you just said in that lesson. It made no sense in that CPD session. So being able then to meet with them in the next day or whenever suits. Because I know certainly our staff have gone, I'm sorry, but it's too fast for me on a Tuesday. I don't keep up, which is absolutely fine. So it's got to be right for those members of staff who aren't comfortable on the computers compared to ours who've gone, I'm absolutely fine with this. I found this, and this. So that, as you said, having that one person you go and chat to when you want to go, I now want to know a bit more, I think has helped ease some people's stresses as well.
And we'll certainly carry that on, because that's such a valuable way of on-the-job training.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant.
It's the same.
So I was loving hearing you all talking about verbal feedback, because I know that certainly on the EdTech podcast that's come up a number of times, but there's been a lot of kind of misconceptions around it, or hesitations, and it's really great to hear how useful it's been, but also how people are using it now. And then I've got a question here. So Sue posted at 10:43 a.m. I'd be interested to know what you would keep digitally now and what is best suited to face-to-face. So I think that's kind of where you were starting to talk about, but also I guess lays back slightly to also the coaching side of things. But yeah, I'd love to hear, so what you'd keep digitally and what's best suited face-to-face.
I think I would just say that we view the digital space as a tool for what we're doing in lessons. So it's not so much a separation of like, that's digital, that's face-to-face. I think for me, everything that we're doing digitally helps us with what we're doing in the classroom. So I know we've talked loads about feedback, but that's a good example where, of course, we're going to be telling them feedback in the room with us. Of course, it's going to be delivered face-to-face. But the tool of them having access to it, us being able to, record, all of those things are still going to be used going forward. I think so. For me, there's not like a real separation of different things that we're going to leave behind. I think it's a tool that we can use at home and here, and particularly as we enter this phase where, let's face it, a lot of students are still going to be dipping in and out of school as they're isolating, etc. Not to kind of forget about those digital things, I think.
I very much hope the days of screeds of marking are completely over. Teachers kind of walking out of school with 26 books they've got to mark. I'm kind of hoping those days are completely finished, and just the importance of that feedback and that feed forward, the dialogue between teacher and the children, between the students, and that self-assessment and reflection. So I think hopefully the education system will have taken a great leap forward, and we won't revert back to screeds of marking, because it certainly doesn't benefit the teacher or the student, or to help progress learning. So very much about self-assessment, self-reflection, next steps, target setting, pitching 2 stars and a wish, or something like that.
Fantastic. I think we are coming up to time. I'll wait for Lucy to jump on screen to give me a sort of virtual poke in the arm. But Lucy, I just wondered if we had time for 30-second key sort of takeaways for everyone listening in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so any final thoughts on balancing assessment, plugging those attainment gaps, and ensuring the well-being of this kind of school community? Very hard to sum up in 30 seconds, but if you were to say one thing, what would that be to kind of leave us with? Who'd like to go first?
I think I would say use what you've got available and what you've learned and improved on. So I think sometimes it feels like we're faced with this big change of the students coming back, but instead it's a consistency. It's you know, bringing what they've done at home into a classroom. So use what you've got available. For me, that was using, you know, exemplar work has been really helpful, but it might be other things for you. Kind of don't abandon those. Use them going forward. That would be my
very good advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of don't abandon things. And I think that's my biggest sort of concern now as we move forward into this new norm, whatever that may be in the future, is that we've learned so much and we've changed so much in what we do. We've got to work on maintaining all the good things and not falling back. I do think we're assessing more effectively. I do think we're working with the pupils more collaboratively. I think they're enjoying it more by and large. You've always got the odd exception, but I think by and large they are. And we need to hang on to that. So as we transfer back into the classroom, you're right, we need to keep on, you know, the digital learning, the digital planner, the fact that they've got your recordings kept. We can carry on with all of that. And I need to be careful we don't, you know, have some staff, you know, going back to the comfort zone. You know, it's like sort of, you know, starting a healthy eating plan, isn't it? You really find the benefit of it. And then it's very tempting to just, you know, pig out on a bad day. So it's kind of, okay, let's sort of keep everybody on track. And that's the challenge ahead now. But I think it's a positive challenge. I think people are on board.
I think trust your teachers, take control of the curriculum, focus on what's important, make sure you're embedding from your early years and making sure those core skills are there and making sure they've got appropriate and relevant skills and knowledge when they transition up to secondary, and focus on that feedback and that feedback and feed forward. And yeah, it's a journey together. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and, you know, learn from each other, collaborate, communicate with a high level of accountability on all sides, including the teachers and you know, parents at home, and it will all come together. And celebrate your successes, something we're not always very good at as educators, but really look back and think, good grief, we did really well, and be proud to celebrate your successes.
And I think that's it for us. We want to have time to reflect what's gone well, what we're going to keep, what will we not go back to a non-digital world on, the things that are now become non-negotiables, where actually it saved us time, it's worked for those students, and they've made progress because of what we've put into place. Let's look at what they are when we've got some time to reflect, and then keep them going and keep them working as they are doing so well currently.
Well, thank you all so much. I have to say, as someone who's got a child in school, it's really heartening to hear, you know, who's looking after his interests as well, and all the amazing things that are being done around the country and internationally. So thank you all for sharing, and thank you, Lucy, and best of luck with the rest of the event. Thank
you, Sophie, so much for hosting, and yeah, be good to share some more of the stories on your channels too. And thank you to our audience for joining the panel discussion again. Next up we have George Bly from Greenshaw High School. Now George is joining us to talk about a slightly different approach that they have to identifying those gaps, as we've been talking about this morning. So George, if you just want to introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do in the school, and I will hand the reins over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Lucy. It's quite worrying when I see my massive face on the screen here, so I apologise for that. I'm just going to share some of the stuff that we've been doing around assessment, actually. So Lucy asked me to focus around our approach to assessment during the lockdown phase. So when we're in school, it's slightly different, but I'll focus on that. So in terms of us as a school, we're about 2,000 students, coming up to about 2,000 students now, so quite big, growing each year as well. We got new intake every year that gets bigger and bigger, and my role in the school really is to look after all of our online learning, digital learning. So you can imagine I've been quite busy around this time. I'm going to look at some stuff around assessment and identifying the gaps in knowledge and things like that. The first thing I want to talk about is what our approach was during this lockdown. So it's very similar to the last lockdown, but on this one, we focus a lot more on the assessment side of stuff. So you see on the screen here, majority of the week's live lessons. When we come to Friday, we have an assessment day for all year groups. And the week after, we give them the feedback quite early on in the week, so they can get used to having that as a routine for them. When it comes to the assessment day itself, the idea of that day on a Friday is for teachers to work together throughout the week to identify what the students should have learned through the live lessons. So in geography, for example, they might say, here are the 5 things that we think our students should have learned throughout the live lessons this week. They'll then create either a multiple choice quiz or an extended writing task based on that week's learning. And teachers are looking to identify the gaps, the common misconceptions, the usual kind of thing. So the assessment day, depends what year group you're in, depends on what task you get. So some of them might be multiple choice quizzes. Some of them might be an extended tasks. Typically for our year 10s and our year 11s, we've done a lot more extended writing tasks. But then the next week they will do a multiple choice quiz. For lower down the school, they're quite used to doing multiple choice because when we're in school normally, every Wednesday afternoon they have an assessment hour, and they will get given a tablet and they complete their multiple choice quiz in school. So we've carried that on at home for the lower school, doing that on a Friday instead. So the students, well, you can see a quick screenshot there. That's a year 11 example for drama. So they get given the PDF there of what their task is, and the right-hand side, they get an area to actually put in their written responses. So the idea of that then is on the Friday afternoon, as the results are coming in live, as the students are submitting their work, the teacher can look at the answers submitted, and then based on the results of what the students have written, they can then plan their next lesson on the Monday based on any common misconceptions, or for example, I might say all of my class got question 5 wrong. So we'll focus on that in the next lesson. Each of our lessons start with a do now, which is a 5-question quick task for students to do. If we were in school, the do now will be done on a small whiteboard. So they write down the 5 answers and hold it up for the teacher. Online, we just use a form for that, and the students can submit that and teachers see it coming through live. So based on the results on the Friday, people will go, oh, okay, question 3 on my assessment, most students got that wrong. So I'm going to ask about that in my do now task. So it starts kind of the circle of the kind of assessment of feedback going. So in terms of feedback itself, teachers can then give feedback live on the assessment on the Friday. So once the student has submitted either the written task, they will get given a small piece of feedback from their teacher. So you can see it's a small screenshot of written task there. So the student answer appears at the top, and then the one underneath is the teacher feedback. So teachers will write the feedback for their class. If it's a multiple choice quiz, even better for us because they actually get instant feedback anyway, which is brilliant. So the teachers don't have to do anything for that at all. The students get the feedback straight away. That's something they really like when we're in school for assessment hour as well, because they see that straight away when they're doing their assessments. So the feedback happens as the assessments are being completed on the Friday, and then it's all about retaining the knowledge really. So teachers can then decide whether to reuse any of their do now questions they've used in that first lesson the next day, or teachers may also reuse the questions in the next assessment. So I might say, well, they still haven't quite cracked this element of geography. I'll use that in my next assessment as well. So the idea of all of this really is to retain that knowledge. So the circle works with an assessment on a Friday, the feedback, teachers picking up the common misconceptions and wrong answers, using it on their first lesson back on the Monday, analysing again, and reusing them if necessary. So this is all really good if everyone engages. So you can imagine we've got 2,000 students. A lot of those are vulnerable students, different home lives, different circumstances. So what do we do with them? Because you can imagine you might have a class of, SEN needed kids or lower ability students that really needs more support. So we have a strategy around that. And we've actually redeployed a lot of our LSAs. So we call them learning support assistants. They could also be called teaching assistants in some schools. So LSAs, obviously at the moment, can't do their normal job. So they would normally sit with the student in the lesson and support them. They can't do that. So we redeployed them into be a small team of support for those students. So they're still supporting the students they would normally. However, now they're supporting with their online learning on a one-to-one basis. So some I've seen, some LSAs even say, all right, I'll meet you online, we'll share our screens to each other, and I'll support you that way. So we redeployed the LSAs to do that function. And I think it's even little things as well, like getting them logged on, stuff like that. For us, we take it for granted that we just log onto Frog and do the work. But a lot of students that struggle with that, and struggle with remembering passwords and usernames. So our LSAs have been absolutely fantastic at being redeployed just to do that focus. And hats off to them, because it's challenging. It can be really challenging. We all know how challenging it can be sometimes working with students that need extra support. But they've done an absolutely sterling job with that. So vulnerable students are really important. Also, what we've done as well is, I think most schools have done this, is do the laptops from a DFE and things like that. So we've got all of that stuff that we've helped our students with. But I really wanted to give a shout out to the LSAs. I think sometimes they get overlooked a little bit in a lot of schools. So it's been great. They've been doing some one-to-one support with our students. The last thing I wanted to touch on, I mean, Lucy's to keep this short, so I'm going to. The last thing I wanted to talk about is something called the Study Hub. This is something that we have launched recently with our Year 11 students. If it was a normal school year, it would be amazing to launch this with Year 11 at this time, because it'll be ready for exams. However, they're not going to do an exam, so we're looking at launching this for Year 10 as soon as possible, ready for next year. So the Year 11s are currently using the Study Hub, and what the Study Hub is it's a portal online that allows them to log on whenever they want, and it's a big revision tool, basically. I am going to share it briefly with you, because I think it's quite nice for you to see actually see it live and what it actually does. So I'm just going to bring that up in here. So you'll see when I open this up, there is a variety of different sections inside our Frog platform. This is what I would see if I'm a Year 11 student. So I'm now seeing here the Study Hub section inside Frog. So I've got some tips to use it, and we give them a timetable for the week for the Study Hub as well, so what they should focus on. We've only launched it for sciences and English at the moment, but we're looking at launching some option subjects after half term as well, after the Easter break. If I go into here and I say I want to focus on my sciences today, this is what it looks like for a student. So we've broken it down into some really, really clear areas for them. So the subjects are at the top, so biology, chemistry and physics. And they've also got a couple of bits on side their first page there. So we've got the knowledge checker. And the first thing this does is give them a tick list of all the things they need to know within each subject. So I'm focusing on B2, for example. So B2 in biology is scaling up. So in here, I can see that I've got 3 different review periods throughout the year. And I can tick these off as I go. And I can press save, and that saves it on there. I can come back to this and I can edit that. I've now done these 2 as well and work through that. You can also see here there's some notes as well to them to type in at the bottom. So if they need to focus on certain things, they can put it in that section. Best thing about this is we can run a report. It's just a form inside Frog. So we can run a report on that and we can see who's engaging. If I go into one of the sections here, so we then got subtopics on the right. So B2 scaling up here. As you can see, there are 2 in here at the moment. So I'm not going to try and read these out because I can never say them properly. But let's say I'm looking at this diffusion one here. Each of the pages look exactly the same for all the subjects. So we've got a video, recall, extend, and apply. So the video is a video that our teachers have made. So actually our teachers' voices talking to them. So over the summer break last year, we got teachers to create those for each of their subject areas. So that's on the page. We then got 2 sets of flashcards here. Recall are quick sort of question and answers. So what is diffusion? There's the answer. And they can flick through those as they wish. And extend over here is more kind of bigger thinking questions. So longer answers. So they can flick those around and see the answers of those as well. So we then check their knowledge of those. We don't check the extend, but we check the recall over here. So there's then a short quiz underneath. The students can then launch, and it's the quiz about these flashcards. So they have to look at the flashcards before they do the quiz. And the last section is the apply. This is the sort of the extended answer, written answer section at the bottom. So this is more like an exam question or an extended essay question. So the students will write in the box here. I'll just write that rubbish for now, just to give an example. They'll write their answer into the box and press save. As soon as they press save, what's quite nice is they get an example answer come up here. So they can't see the example answer until they've submitted their answer into the box. And again, all this stuff can be run as a report. So again, that's just a form. So we can get the data of that and see who's engaged. We can get the results of the quiz as well. So we can do a lot of reporting on engagement, which is what we really wanted to build it for. So I wanted to show that at the end in terms of the whole study hub process. I think it's quite an important part of the platform that we're going to push forward. Like I said, we're going to have some assessments, not assessments, option subjects after half term, after Easter. So I think we are getting there with it, but it does add on to the whole feedback and assessment tool, because this is basically a massive revision tool for the students. So there's a lot of work gone into it, as you can probably tell, but we are really open to people having to share this with us. So if you feel like, you know, we could really use that in our school, maybe just go through Lucy, let us know, and we can always talk. You know, if you're already a frog school, absolutely ideal. We can just go up and onto your platform. If you're not a frog school, hold another conversation. But if you are, then obviously we can help you get that onto your platform and work with us to build some more content, maybe. But yeah, Lucy, I wanted to show that at the end. I just stole a bit of the thunder at the end there around the assessments, but hopefully it all makes sense. Hopefully.
It's fantastic. George, you've missed the channel going absolutely wild. Mark Anderson mentioned that you might like chocolate hobnobs, and and half of the audience are already trying to send you chocolate hobnobs by the end of the week to get a copy of it, and you've just offered that out to everybody without the hobnobs. So
yeah, I mean, bribes are welcome always. But yeah, my deputy head that's leading this for me, we said from the start that we're not in this business to keep our stuff to ourselves. If we can share something that makes someone's lives a bit easier, then we'll definitely be up for it.
Right. Well, I think with that in mind, for those of you that do have frog, drop us a line and we'll sort that out for you. If we can't just move yours, George, we'll look at how we can build a template as well.
I'm going to just mention as well, because Adrian has kicked off, I can say this. I'm going to mention that I will say thank you to Paul Conkey, because Paul built the little flashcards that flip round. So before Adrian kicks off and has a go at me again, I will give the credit to Paul for that.
Well done, George. Well done. Thank you. But it's a family, so anything that we can do as a team to share or to help facilitate moving that across to other schools, we will do. And thank you very, very much for sharing that. Awesome work. Lovely to see how you are checking on how students are not just how teachers are not just identifying the gaps, but then double checking to see if those kids have actually retained that information. Lovely. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you very much.
All right. See you.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye. Bye. Again, thank you to all of our guests today. The next of our guests is Tizzy. So Tizzy Sylvester from Frederick Goff School. Tizzy's the assistant head teacher, and she's going to be taking us through a bit of a journey from the past, the present, and the future. No pressure, but it was lovely to hear from you at the panel, and I will hand straight over to you, but obviously I'm here in the background if you need me.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Lucy. Okay. So my name is Tizzy Sylvester. I am an assistant head teacher at Frederick Goff School, in charge of the digital curriculum, teaching and learning, business studies, and ICT. So I'm going to talk to you about our journey in terms of where we started in lockdown 1 and where we are currently with lockdown 2 or 3 as it's now known, and what we're going to do in the future. And having seen what George has just presented, I'm now thinking of changing what we're going to do in the future to link to what we've just seen. So I'll be in touch, George, because it looks fantastic. So just to tell you a little bit about ourselves to begin with. So I'm just going to present my screen to you so you can see a bit more about us. Okay, so we are Frederick Goff School. We are the largest school in North Lincolnshire. We have about 1,000 children on site, and we are located in South Scunthorpe. Just as you know, the phone is now ringing. So I'll just shut the door because the phone is now ringing. Anyway, let's carry on. So we have 40% of our pupils come from households with high levels of deprivation. We're a very inclusive school. We make sure and we believe that every child should have a good education, has the right to succeed, and we break down those barriers to learning to make sure that our children are able to be successful in their future. Most of our children go to one of the 2 local colleges when they leave ourselves, or they go on to an apprenticeship locally. British Steel is our major apprenticeship provider. It's just down the road from our school. And we like our motto, try your best, be nice, and you'll do well. And I think that is just really valuable to say that actually if you are a good person and you try hard, you will do well in the future. So that's a bit about our school. So lockdown 1, when that first happened, we had conversations about what on earth we were going to do. We used the assignment manager in Frog a little bit, not particularly, but we did use it a little bit, and we decided that was the route that we would go down. So before lockdown 1 hit, we actually decided that what we would do was create several, and I mean several, different how-to guides. We had a bit of an issue whereby some of our members of staff were great on Frog, they knew exactly what to do, they could set assignments already, but then equally we had the opposite side to that, where some of our members of staff hadn't even logged into Frog. So we followed our normal platform, and we can you still see the screen okay? Yeah. So we followed our normal timetable, the students did, and we continued setting assignments using the assignment manager on a Sunday, and students then completed them in line with their timetables. That went really well. We decided that we would launch Fantastic Fridays. So they used to happen in school. We'd have breakfast together as a staff body. It was voluntary, so people would meet for breakfast if they could, and we'd share a snippet of teaching and learning that had worked well in the week, or something we'd tried in a group that we'd found had been successful. So we shared them normally in school, but we relaunched them virtually when we were in lockdown 1. So staff would join our virtual meetings and we would share different things. So we looked at how to talk over a PowerPoint. We also focused on using the mark book in Frog because people weren't familiar with that. We also looked at how do you mark on Frog? How do you even know if a student's completed any work? So we had a whole host of different things that we did on a Friday morning before school started, and they were really successful. We found because they were virtual, some people who couldn't come because of childcare issues normally were able to attend, and they were recorded as well so we could share them with all of our staff if they couldn't make it for any reason. We launched a tracking service, so our LSAs rang every single week to talk to the same family, which was fantastic. I think the parents really appreciated the fact they had a one-to-one with the same person, so someone to talk to really. So every child then was tracked, and any data, any interventions that needed to happen were shared with their pastoral teams so that we were able to see exactly what our students were up to, how they were progressing, and if they needed any support. Towards the end of lockdown 1, we launched Q&A pages because we noticed that students wanted to just have a chat really, ask a question to their tutor team or to their subject teachers. So we launched a Q&A page, and that actually meant that there was a conversation able to flow between the children and an adult as well, from not within their home. Carrying on, we noticed that actually by the first week in, 72% of our students were engaging with Frog in an average week. We were really pleased with that, and it continued to grow every single week as well. So more and more students are actually engaging with their learning through that day. We also found that 85% of our students engaged with our virtual platform, whether that was using the Q&A process that we put into place, or equally just messaging using the messaging service as well. So we're really pleased with how much our students were engaging with our assignments. We did find some of them decided that they would do more work Monday to Thursday and then not have to do the work on the Friday, but they got their work done within their time frame as well, so they could then have Friday afternoons off when the sun was shining, which was absolutely fine. We shared all of our positive feedback actually as well, because we did numerous different surveys. We got quite good at doing surveys, in fact, and we managed to share that with people as well. So anything that was positive, we put onto the Frog page and our Facebook pages as well. And we put our positive stories on Frog. You can see there's some examples of some good work that students had completed during lockdown 1. And it was just really nice to actually share some positivity around with our students too. I think at that point, everybody was doing Joe Wicks. We put the Joe Wicks system PE sessions onto our Frog page. The students could take part in those as well. And we came second in the Frog World Championships. Massive accolade to ourselves. Certainly when we were setting those low stake quizzes that Joe was talking about earlier, so we set them so that then students could engage and get instant feedback, which actually saved our teachers time as well, because they could set the quiz, it self-marks, and then they were able to complete things. So that was a real win for us, and we're really, really proud of that. So then we got to the point at the end of lockdown 1 when we suddenly thought, okay, well, what are we going to do with this now? And we spoke to Graham, who was fantastic, and thought about creating live lessons. To be honest with you, I don't think personally didn't think we'd ever use these live lessons, how wrong I was. But we made live lessons for every single child just before we had the summer break. So then we came back to school and decided we would survey every child to find out what the provision was like at home. Did they have a computer? Did they have a Chromebook? Did they have a tablet? Thankfully, we did that at the exactly right time as well, so we're really pleased that we did that at that point in time. So we bought a load of devices. We also bought a visualizer for every member of staff. We equally bought headsets for our members of staff as well. So we bought lots of different devices for everybody. We had a conversation then with our middle leaders about, well, do we have a lockdown timetable? Do we change our timetables and have one in case, and making sure that things are a little bit easier in terms of when we teach certain things? Maybe we teach 100+ children in one go. So we then coded that as well, so it was in the background ready. But if I'm honest, I still at that point didn't necessarily think we would use it. And then here we go again. It's Christmas. We've just got back into lockdown, and suddenly there was that bit of fear. I told our head that we had these live lessons, everything was going to work, but I'm certainly sure the night before we went live to 1,328 children, I didn't sleep. So we have all of our lessons on Frog. So every child has an individual link, an individual bespoke page that tells them their room, which was really helpful in September. So they went straight to their bubble rooms. They have their bubble rooms on there, and they also have their links if they've got options as well. And all of our lessons are live within Frog, so via Google Meet, but sat in Frog. I have to say, Graham was amazing, and he coded it for us. And I didn't think I'd ever be able to do it, but I can now write some code, not as good as anybody else's, but I can get by myself now as well. Our IT team have been invaluable. They have managed to up attendance for us, for our students, and break down any barriers that any child had got with their IT. We've given out 400 devices. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare getting 400 devices getting back into school. I'm sure the reception team will hate us at that point when we're trying to get these things back. But we wanted to ensure that there were no barriers, whether that's year 7 and 8 using tablets that we've provided or Chromebooks for 9 through to 11. We wanted to make sure students were able to engage really swiftly with their learning and these live lessons that were in place. So as I said earlier, we changed our CPD sessions. We moved from Rose and Shine to online survival, online teaching. We wanted to make sure that if we were teaching these 5 lessons a day online, because we decided not to follow the lockdown timetable, but actually continue with our normal timetable. How can you survive 5 hours on a machine? What could we do? I mean, the irony was that our online session was actually online, but we wanted long-term to make and share strategies for survival. We've had a huge amount of attendance this time, actually. 94% of our students have engaged with our online lessons, which I'm really, really impressed about. So we track every single lesson. And as I mentioned earlier, we've used Google extensions, several, specifically the ones you can see, but just to make sure that our students were able to, our staff were able to find ways they could reduce their workload, but equally at the same time, the students could benefit from these various different things that we'd found as well, and wanted to share that really quickly. We have relaunched our weekly check-ins. The phone call started again. The LSA team have been brilliant. They have started phoning the same parents again to make sure there's communication between us and them. We also did a staff survey. So any issues that we had, however small or large these things were, we met individually with anybody with an issue. So I think I dealt with several members of staff, and it was an IT issue. So we had one-to-one so that I could talk through what their concerns were and then hopefully resolve them as well. A bit nerve-wracking when you're the IT person, because suddenly you're thinking, well, I hope I do know the answer. And actually then what we did was check back in with those members of staff a week later as well, just to make sure that actually what we'd said was the solution was actually working for them. We also launched our staff sanity group. So we then made sure that staff knew, if you're not teaching, go on, and you want to, go get some fresh air. And it's absolutely fine to do so. Please go and get some fresh air and have a walk if you want. And so we launched our a sanity group to make sure that staff were able to log their walks or runs or bikes, whatever they were doing. And roughly speaking now, we nominate our students every single week. So roughly there's about 1,250 nominations a week for students, and they get put into an Amazon voucher gift box as well. We pick out winners every single week too. You'll see on the screen As an SLT, we wrote to our members of teams. So we wrote to people in our departments and our links, and then personally wrote them a card for every half term. They went home in the post. And then at the end of the week, we sent them a care package as well, just to say thank you for the amazing work they've done during this lockdown. So that was quite nice for everybody to receive as well. And then moving forward, so in terms of what we've learned, and I certainly think George's ideas are going to come into their own here as well. We're going to launch PrEP from September. So PrEP is essentially going to be a platform that students will use for their after school work. So currently, homework is sporadic in our school. There is a plan. I'm not sure we stick to it 100%. So what we have found is we have some lazy boys, and we have a culture whereby they hit year 10 and 11 and suddenly there's all this work they've got to do. They've got to revise. They've got to be able to recall information, and it's not their norm because we haven't instilled that culture in year 7 and 8. So we're going to hopefully change that from September, launching PrEP. So the idea is that students will do about 30 to 40 minutes a night. They will be responsible for their own learning and their own time. So the assignments will be set on a Sunday. They can choose when they want to do them, whether they do them all on a Saturday, they do them through the week, but they might have extracurricular activities. So we're going to try and balance it really and install some independent skills in them so that they become more confident, more resilient, but more importantly, GCSE ready. So by the time they get to GCSEs, they know some skills in terms of how to revise. They know the different ideas they've got. They can recall information, they're exam ready, and with a focus that we're going to change our culture of boys, and hopefully then with some of them, they will become more ready for their exams, their GCSEs, as and when it happens for them. So PrEP is our system that I'm going to launch from September. It doesn't look as good as George's, but I'm going to steal his answers and his information, and that's where we're going to move forward, because what we don't want to lose is all that wonderful skills and upskilling we've done with our teachers and our students. We want that to continue for the future. And that's me.
Tizzy, thank you so much. It's been lovely again to just hear from you that those moments of vulnerability when you were the night before you're launching to all of those kids, and the change from being so vulnerable to now saying, actually, we're going to address this, we're going to address these technologies, and we're going to bring it back into the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly there was a nervous moment of, is it going to work? But I just think how far we've come from lockdown 1, when we just set assignments that, don't get me wrong, were amazing. But now that live teaching that's going on to those students is just incredible. And what they've got from it is absolutely fantastic as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for staying with us and sharing this with the audience today. And we'll make sure that obviously you get to steal George's stuff.
They're definitely lazy, Steve, not lazy.
All right, well, take care. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So our last slot today is it's a real labour of love. I mean, we've absolutely, I said at the beginning of our event today, we've absolutely loved being the facilitators of these real world learning of this real world learning journey, really, for all of our schools, and facilitating that sharing of schools across the globe. It's been great, and we will continue this community of schools. But what we have done is we've asked Mark Anderson to join us and to look at some of those stories that our schools have been sharing, and to help us recognise how that has really panned out. So, as I said, for the last 10 months now, we're on our 4th real world learning series, and we will have another one in June. And our event in June will be really looking at sort of next year and the workload and balancing that out. But until then, we're just having a little problem with Mark joining the session. So Mark's going to take a little bit longer than we expected. But what I wanted to say, it's been absolutely lovely to be able to be the facilitator of sharing these stories. So our team, the customer success team of most of who you've had shout outs today, but they've been collating some of those anecdotes and stories and ideas that you've been sharing. They've been put on our website, and they've been shared with with Mark as a completely independent kind of judge. It's not so much a competition, it's more about recognition. And he's here. Did I manage to pad long enough? I didn't quite get onto the dad jokes.
Hey, yeah, not today, Lucy. Makes a nice change, doesn't it? I've got one for you though, and it's cheese related again. What cheese do you use to mask a horse? And it's not a ladyboy related.
I know this one.
You know this one. Go for it. Go.
It's mascarpone.
Very good. But unfortunately, Steve beat you in the chat. So Steve as well. Well done, Steve. Thank you.
Mark, hopefully I've probably stolen a lot of your thunder by waffling until you join. So I'm going to disappear straight away and hand over to you.
Hopefully you can see my screen, which I know you can because I can see my own screen. I'm just going to jump across into my presentation here, and hopefully this will be full screen for you to see it. What a fantastic group of sessions today, from Mick right at the outset, talking complete and utter sense as always. Let's hope that governments around the world heed the words of Mick in keeping things sensible and keeping things on track and where they need to be in terms of putting young people at the front of our thinking with all that we do. It's been great as well to hear from all of the schools today sharing their real world stories. As Sophie alluded to earlier, it's just been a brilliant series of events. Hearing people come together, and we've heard the words again. I often hear when I attend a frog event about the frog family. And lovely to see the work of Paul Conkey being then embedded in the work and what have you of George Bly and the team at Greenshaw, and then that knocking on and being able to be available to other schools around the world to support them with learning and teaching. Just a real privilege to be involved with the frog family. I'm not going to spend a long time introducing myself. The session today, to wrap up, I'm going to talk a little bit about my observations of real world learning, but I wanted to, I know I've got some bits about me, but I'm just going to go through those things there really quickly, which basically say I've done a few things and I've got a bit of an idea about the things that I'm talking about. I don't want to spend labour any time on there because I know your time is precious. But I do want to jump in and think about things, how they have been. Who hasn't seen or heard one of these things in the last 12 months? Bitmoji classrooms, memojis being used. These have been really blowing up across the world as places and spaces for children to come in and join you in your lessons in so many different ways. There's been new words come into our vernacular, into our everyday speak. In a catchphrase world, say what you can see. Of course, if I can beat Steve in the chat, because I can't see the chat anymore. But yeah, Zoom bombing became an actual term. These things have been happening around the world and impacting on all of us. But what's been lovely, again, hearing from Elizabeth a moment ago, Lizzie, about things at Frederick Gough, moving from Rosenshines to online learning and focusing on those things. A large part of the work I do sees me supporting teachers with confidence and competence, and it's just been fantastic for me to see how far the education profession has moved forwards in the last 12 months to be able to be far more confident and competent at using these systems. And it was a great question that was asked in the panel earlier about, what would you keep moving forwards? And there are so many great things. One of the things that I often hear about, as we've heard in the discussions today, is about verbal feedback, something I'm really passionate about. But also things like virtual parents' evenings. No more need to fill the car park up of an evening with all your parents coming along to try and have their meeting, which inevitably doesn't happen on time. There have been so many great strides forwards that have been made with the use of technology to support teaching and learning during the last 12 months. And it was great to hear Andrea earlier sharing about how they were using their platform to track and keep on top of all those things there at St. George's in Madrid. It was great to hear from Ellesmere College about how they were able to support learners around the world in so many different ways through the use of technology. I really one thing that really resonated with the presentation from Ellesmere earlier, two things here really about teachers don't need to be tech savvy to teach tech savvy. That's absolutely right. It's about knowing that those things which you can put into your teaching and learning toolkit to make teaching and learning work under those circumstances. And I love the glass half full approach quote at the end about learning or trying to treat obstacles as stepping stones to move yourself forwards. I think that's a lovely way to think about these things rather than being a brick wall in front of you, just actual stones to step along and move along that journey. So I absolutely love that message earlier from Vicky at Ellesmere College. It was great to hear from Joe at Davison as well. Actually, you know, so much technology use can be gimmicky. It's got a real propensity for it, but using technology in ways that are really impactful and purposeful, tying those things into key performance indicators and having those metacognitive conversations with learners so they are aware of where they need to get to and then have those strategies to help them get to where they need to get to is so important. And it was lovely to hear from Jo talking about that at Davison and also linking that into her experience in the geography department as a geographer. There's so many great stories we've seen today. The one from George earlier was very popular, looking at how they've collapsed things there. And I remember from the Frog conference back last year, Nick, the head teacher at the school, talking about how they sort of moved around the school day. But the key point with all the things at the Greenshaw was about keeping things really, and George talked about it as well, with the support that was given to vulnerable students or students who've got additional needs. But it was, you know, really making one thing that Nick was really clear on in his presentation back at the Frog conference last year was about how you need to be mindful of where students are at and rearranging the school day to make learning still continue, progress still happen, but most importantly, making sure that students are safe, healthy, happy, well, and able to access the activities at school. It's just fantastic to see those things. And if you haven't had a chance to go to Greenshaw and talk to George and the team, I don't want to speak for him, but I was certainly very welcome there when I visited the school a few years ago to see the great things that are happening at Greenshaw. It was also great to hear again from Lizzie a second ago about how things have moved forward in such a short space of time as well, and the ways in which they approach that, moving from things in lockdown 1 through to lockdown 2. And the high levels of engagement that Lizzie shared in that session before, again, a massive reflection of the success of their implementation at the school and the way in which they're approaching those things. And to do that sort of thing with 1,300 plus students is no mean feat. I wouldn't want to be in that position myself. And again, it is really tough to do these sort of things. So hats off and kudos to all of the presenters today, all of the schools involved. And it really is a Frog family. So many ideas coming together. One of the hallmarks of every event I've ever been involved in with Frog has been the live chat and people being really open and willing to share ideas, share resources. And there's another thing that I really love about Frog with the Frog Academy is that the ability to be able to sort of tap into those things that have been developed for one or maybe two or schools or a MAT, but then can be applied directly into your school as well. It's been great to hear as well, people saying great things about the work of Graham and others on the team in supporting you with your work in your schools as well. Yeah, 94% engagement. There's the stat there from Lizzie before. Absolutely brilliant to see that level of engagement in online learning. Could you say you get 94% engagement with all student, or with 94% of your student population when they're in classrooms? If the pandemic wasn't there, I'd argue that probably wouldn't be the case. So fantastic to see that. And I love the sanity group as well that was shared by Lizzie in that session there. Because I sped through my little bit at the beginning, I didn't have a chance to talk about 2 weekly shows that I do on YouTube. On a Monday evening, I do a show which has got a United Arab Emirates focus. I do quite a lot of work in the Middle East. And so I do a show on a Monday called Learn Live UAE. And I do a show on a Thursday with a UK focus called UK Edu Stories. And what I'd like to share now, a few other stories of people who've really and done some amazing things during the course of the pandemic. And so the first is a teacher called Michelle Grant. You can see her Twitter handle maybe in the screen there. A year 4 primary teacher who had her NQT year during the lockdown. And as Vicky was saying about the RQT teacher in her school who had found some great tech and then shared it to all colleagues and things. You know, Michelle spoke really brilliantly about the amazing work and the approaches she was taking in her school. Everyone really was thrown in at the deep end. It was lovely to hear from Michelle. And so UK Edu Stories is a show that I do with a former presenter on the panel and in the presentation in the Frog conference last year as well. And she and I were really overwhelmed and blown away by the not only the amazing bookcase behind Michelle, but her approaches to making sure that learning continues, but keeping it all around conversations, the children, making sure there was an opportunity for everyone to sort of stay connected. And if there's one word that has shone through every presentation today, it's been that word relationship. And relationships are so important, and what that again was shone through for every conversation today from every school that's presented has been how each school has worked really hard to not just sustain but maintain those great relationships that ensure that learning happens. We know that that's important. We know from the research of people like John Hattie and his visible learning work, and from the Education Endowment Foundation and the things that they curate and share. Relationships are absolutely key to ensuring the success of the work you do in schools. Vicky herself spoke recently about this in more detail in the presentation she did at the Future of EdTech conference back on February the 11th. And in her presentation here, she shared about, again, the importance of relationships, maintaining communication, and working really closely with families to ensure that the learning that was being delivered and shared and to the students that they serve in their community, in their alternative provision school, sort of still carried on and was sustained and maintained. And it's just such a difficult thing to try and do. But again, it goes back to this idea of relationships. And here's someone else who presented on the show, Harmeet Sahota, again talking really clearly about how they have these really strong relationships with teachers, not just important to have a strong relationships with your students, but with your teachers. And we heard that again through lots of the presentations today about how you work with your staff. Lizzie said about recording the activities you do for wellbeing alongside the things you do for teaching and learning. And these were some great ideas shared by Harmeet in his presentation, talking about how he's doing things at his schools in and around Birmingham. Taking things more worldwide. Another great hallmark of learning and sharing and the education space in the last year has been the sharing that's been going on, and we've seen that in the chat again today, just around George's and Paul Conkey's work there that George was sharing before. This is an infographic shared by Ollie Lewis. He's a senior leader at a school, British International School in Abu Dhabi. And schools sort of coming together and teachers coming together and sharing the what works approaches so that schools are able to move forward, we're able to move forwards and focus in on those things which really matter, B, really important, but C, most importantly, actually work. And so there's lots of these stories around the world. Here's Tim Evans sharing again at the Global EdTech Future of EdTech events a few weeks ago, talking about how they did things in Hong Kong. But again, you can see the statistics here about sort of access to infrastructure and technology that schools have in Hong Kong. 90% 5G coverage, second fastest internet in the world, second most sold mobile devices, 8th most technologically advanced country in the world. All of these things. It would be nice if we had all those things everywhere around the world, but obviously we haven't. But the key point of bringing Tim's information up here on stage again isn't the fact that wow, aren't they lucky? As Tim was alluding to throughout his presentation, and you can watch this back on the Global EdTech YouTube channel if you want to. But the key messages from Tim's thing wasn't so much about the technology. Again, it was about the people. And that's something that which has shone massively through all the conversations again today. It's about working with families, working with colleagues, working with all your key stakeholders to make it so that these the teaching and learning can still continue, because people are people. I'm not trying to start singing Depeche Mode songs at you, for those of you that are old enough to remember Depeche Mode. But it is the human element which makes these things work. Often when there's an issue with technology, it isn't the actual technology. There's a phrase that I share. Sometimes it's more often the problem lies somewhere between the chair and the laptop. And whatever we can do to support our colleagues in their use of technology to make sure that learning continues is always for the better. So we've heard you talk about Nick. This is Nick House, who's the executive head teacher at Greenshaw Academy, where he shared back at the Frog events back in the summer about how they work their school day. And if you can see closely there's information here about that really works to support continuity and consistency and things within your family. So 8:30, wake up, make your bed. That's right, every student, make your bed, shower, get dressed, eat breakfast, so forth and so on. And it's been great to see these sort of really wholesome approaches to rounded support for families in communities around the world. We saw Nick again sharing with the fantastic Kate Ragg with Sophie on a panel discussion back in that event in the summer as well. Key things to remember really with all of this, teachers are amazing. The openness, the willingness to share, the collegiality, the shoulders to cry on, all these things that we see being shared by teachers on Edu Twitter, on social media, in Facebook groups, in the Frog forums, it's a real hallmark of how great a profession teaching really is. Teachers are the most valuable resource in the world. I heard Tim Evans say in his presentation, the one I mentioned before from him in Hong Kong, we are, as a profession, we're values driven, responsive, we're dedicated, we're supportive, we're collegiate. And it goes back again to that key message about relationships being absolutely key. So those are some real world learning stories, and I had the sort of unenviable, I guess. I mean, talk about Frog passing the buck, but I've had the unenviable task of going through the various nominees for the Real World Learning Awards in the past few weeks, and it's been really tough actually, because I don't want to sort of pit one school against another and all those different things. But what I have done is look really carefully at the stories from schools, and stories are what help drive us forward as a race, as a species, and help move us forwards. And we learn from each other. We learn from these stories. And so it's been the stories which have really shone through to me, that I've sort of tied through into the different winners that I've sort of picked from the various nominees for each of the different sections in these Frog 2021 Real World Learning Awards. And so I haven't got a drum kit here. I could do a bit of that, but I'm not going to deafen your ears with any tapping on my machine or anything. And I'm going to get cracking on and share with you who the various winners are for these different categories in the Frog 2021 Real World Learning Awards. So the first award is one where we're looking at great examples of online learning. We had some fantastic nominees for this particular award. And it gives me really a huge pleasure to award this Real World Learning Award to Greenshaw High School. So congratulations to Nick and to George and the team at Greenshaw. You are a team who not only lead by example, but there are lots of schools I come across, or teachers I come across, who can really talk a good talk, but you don't sometimes get to see that walk in the walk. But every which way, with everything I've seen and heard and engaged with in relation to Greenshaw, has always been absolutely fantastic. And so it gives me real pleasure to announce that Greenshaw High School is the winner of the Great Example of Online Learning today at this event. So congratulations to everyone there. Thank you very much indeed. And no hobnobs were exchanged in the awarding of this award. In fact, I feel bad now for asking for commission in the chat before. Now, that was something completely different, not related to this in any way, shape or form. The next award goes to a school which has got a great creative example. And so with this award, there are loads of ways in which schools have used technology in really creative ways. But the award today for this one Real World Learning Award, I chose to go to Gosforth Academy. So congratulations. What I really loved about this, Adrian Tate, he works so hard and does so much to support all the teachers and students in the community. And the example that was given to me from the team at Gosforth was the wellbeing resource and site and activities and everything that was put together by Adrian. And I was just blown away, really, because well-being is so important. Being mindful of where all of your students and colleagues are at is so important. I know it's high on the agenda for all schools, but it really shone through the work that Adrian had done on this. So it gives me great pleasure to say congratulations to Gosforth Academy for winning the Great Creative Example Award here at the Real World Learning Awards today. Well done to you, Adrian, and the team at Gosforth. Moving forwards, we've got the Great Engagement with Remote Learners Award. And with this one, it's difficult. How do you track engagement? How do you know learning's happening? How do you know all these different things? Well, I mentioned earlier in this presentation about how technology can have a propensity to be gimmicky sometimes, but you can also use technology for great reasons to track and inspire and give actual real information to your learners. Data is information without context. And when you have that context, it helps give you, as an educator, wisdom to best support your learners. No longer do we have this sort of sage on the stage, and certainly while we've been teaching remotely, you haven't been able to be a sage on a stage at all, albeit you might have been on a virtual stage a few times. So with this in mind, it's really important that learners are, and we know this again from research. I mentioned the importance of students being able to know how to learn through metacognitive strategies earlier in this presentation. And so giving students that information and that wisdom to enable them to move things forwards is super important. And with that in mind, the winner for the Great Engagement with Remote Learners Award goes to Davison High School for Girls. Congratulations to Joe and the team. I really liked how you were using the KPIs, the key performance indicators, as a means of helping have those conversations about learning. And we saw that in your presentation today. So congratulations to you for winning that award, and very well deserved. And congratulations to yourself and all the team at Davison High. Congratulations. The next award goes to a school which gives a great example of sharing. And actually, the event today has proven and sort of reinforced my choice for this particular award. It has nothing to do with geography, and for those of you who know me and know where I live, may already have a feel for where this award might be going. But we heard in conversations earlier, and Adrian Tate from Gosforth certainly picked up on this when George was presenting and was saying that he'd used the work of somebody else with the flashcards to help him develop the system he has there. And of course, with that then, many of you will now know that the award here goes to Paul Conkey and the team at Backwell School, just up the road from me here in North Somerset. The impact of the sharing from the team at Backwell, there are lots of schools that have benefited from the work they've done with Frog to then impact on what happens in schools, not just in London, in Sutton, at Greenshaw, but all around the world. And so it for me was a real no-brainer to choose Backwell School as the winners of the Great Examples of Sharing Award here in the Real World Learning Awards for Frog here in 2021. So congratulations to Conkey and the team there. Well done indeed. The final award was a particularly difficult one, actually, because every school has changed in the last 12 months. Who has changed the most? It was quite a difficult one to sort of get my head around and to think about who it was and where it was and so forth and so on. But this award I've given to a school which hadn't even been actually open for any sort of real length of time at all. This is a school that had to massively pivot from where they were And yes, every school has had to pivot because we've had to close our schools down, our school sites down, but still maintain learning and all these different things. But with this school, I'd say that they hadn't been open very long and had to massively pivot from where they were at the start of their journey to where they had to get to then to support everyone still carrying on in school. And so with all of that in mind, I chose the winner for the most changed school of the last 12 months to be Brighton College, Singapore. I'd say they were a new school starting out, and as you'll have heard from the team there, if you attended the Frog event back in the summer, you'll have heard about how pivotal, and using the same pivot word, but how important Frog was to the school in order for maintaining and sustaining learning, and making sure that students still had all the best that they wanted and needed in terms of their learning, progress, support, teaching, learning, all those different things. So congratulations to Brighton College, Singapore, for winning the Most Changed School Real World Learning Award here at this session today with Frog Education. Now, you'd think that was the end of the awards if you were looking at the brochure, but there is one more special award that's being given out today. This person's name, this is not a school, this is a person. This person has been mentioned numerous times throughout the course of the day today. They haven't presented today, although I've seen this person present many, many times. One of the things which really struck me about this person, beyond, I mean, they do amazing work, and there's so many students in their schools that they support. But the thing which really struck home, and has always struck home with me, with this particular person, has been their passion and dedication for equity, equality, accessibility, all these things that are so important to make sure that every student gets the same opportunities in life and gets the same access to technology, gets the same access to the resources, gets the same access to high quality teaching and learning. And I know that this person puts the learners at the front of every thought that she has in relation to, and I've given the gender away now, haven't I? With that in mind then, I really wanted to take a moment to celebrate the work of Kate Ragg. Well done to Kate for winning the Learning Technologies Award today here at the Real World Learning Awards with Frog. It's given me massive pleasure to be able to share not just this award, but all of the other winners today as well. And it'll sound a bit cheesy, I know, but actually, you know, the real winners in all of these things have been the children in our classrooms, the children in our communities. When, I mean, Sophie talked about as a parent herself, you know, she felt buoyed that there are educators such as those sharing today that are in the profession and being able to support her children. I'm exactly the same. And, you know, I having taught in the classroom and led in schools for more than 20 years, I know that not every school and every teacher has these same approaches. The majority do, but not everyone does. And so it's been great to see and hear from so many amazing educators and leaders in the session today and in all the other sessions I've attended Frog events over the years as well. It really does go back to that idea of the Frog family and everyone being together. And with that in mind, I wanted to just give my own sort of personal little sort of ICT evangelist real world learning award to someone else, because as the person sort of wrapping all these things up, Lucy talked before about the Frog family. Without that Frog family, lots of these things wouldn't have happened. Frog, like many companies, have had their hardships in the last 12 months. When you're working as a company, it's different to working as a school. But I know that all the team at Frog have worked so hard through all sorts of things, from furloughing staff to all these different things, but still making sure that you in your schools are superbly well supported. And so just to wrap up at the end of this session, I really did want to say a massive thank you to all of the team at Frog. On behalf of myself, as an outsider looking in, I see how hard Lucy, Chris, Graham, Amber, you know, Graham, the whole team work so hard at making sure that everything works for you. And I know how passionately They care, led by Lucy, and supported by the whole team, sort of wrapping around it. I know how important it is that things work really, really well for you. And you don't see that in every educational technology company. What Frog have is really quite special, and so that's why it always gives me great pleasure and pride to get the opportunity to continue to work with them and share in the way that I do. So I hope you found that session useful. So those stories and things to take away, a few ideas maybe, and congratulations to our various winners. I'm sure the team at Frog will be in touch with you about your swag and your award badges and all the rest of it. But for me, Mark Anderson, this is me sort of finishing off, saying thank you very much for the opportunity to come and share with you today. And I look forward to catching up with you at some point again in the future. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for those lovely, kind words that you said about us as well. Really appreciate it. And the Frog, obviously, the Frog Real World Learning Awards won't go away. They might be slightly under a different branding, no matter what the future looks like, but it's all about sharing. So whatever happens, we will still be recognising those schools that, and all of the schools that took part, not just the winners. It's again about that community and family of sharing. So thank you very much for doing that for us. We really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure, Lucy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. So that's it. I'm wrapping up today. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for sharing your stories. If anybody wants to get in touch, you know where we are, but if you don't, hello@Frog Education comes through to myself, Amber, Graham, Chris, Claire, Rebecca, and the team. So obviously we're all here to help you. The next event, hopefully Chris will be sharing a little slide for, oh, there we go. The next event you can register for, we're going to have it in June. We're not sure exactly which date, but we will be having that in June, and it's going to be around rediscovering the balance in a changed world. So really looking forward to the future and what we're going to be looking at implementing. And I think a lot of those ideas came out today, but more about that, about what we're going to do in September. So that's it. I'm going to sum up. I'm going to come off screen, and thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you all very soon. Take care. Bye.